Tom, last week, fourth. It's kind of good and it's kind of bad. It shows you got the form, but it's tough to be so close.
Yeah, I know. That was a surprise for me also. I mean, the Sunday before Flanders, I got Wimbledon. Okay, I won. I was really happy with the win because I wasn't expecting to win another Wimbledon in my career the last 2 years. But then I wasn't really happy with my shape already, but it was normal after the sickness. And then on Sunday it was really good actually. Only the last hour, a lot of riders were complaining about cramps and stuff like that, which was normal because it was a pretty warm day and it was hard to get bottles because everybody was racing. The last one on the case, I think I didn't see a car. He just raced all the time. So I was happy with my fourth place. I was there in the final. I was countering the attacks when Sylvain got away again after the Bosberg. And then suddenly, I saw that we had 60 meters and I attacked Fletcher and I was on my own.
A difficult thing to do because this week you're not the ideal preparation. You were involved in a crash halfway through the week. Is that going to affect you?
Yeah, it's not perfect. Yeah, I was feeling really good. That's like I said after Flanders. I was on the way up, and Wednesday made it a little bit more difficult. It's an extra difficulty to overcome.
A lot of people talking in the press about how to beat Cancellara. What's the team tactics going to be for Quick-Step?
We still have to talk about it, but I don't think there's a lot of secrets. You have to stay with him. And there's not many tactics you can plan before Paris-Roubaix. After a few cobble sections, it's possible you lost a half of the team in a crash, for example. So we plan a little bit, but not too much. And then I think the strength of the team is that we have a few guys that we can play with, and we are able to adapt it to circumstances. And that's, I think that's the strength of our team. Here you go.
Mark, we know you as one of the best sprinters in the world. Why are you riding a race like Paris-Roubaix?
I've always wanted to ride. This race is one of the races I watched up. Watched when I was growing up. It's one of the monuments. It's one of the icons of cycling, and it's just different to anything else. So I'm really excited to race it finally. Obviously, I'll be riding in support of a team. I'll be getting experience this year for myself, but we've got two great guys in Bernie and Matt Goss who can get a good result here, and hopefully it can help them to deliver that.
That's the important thing about a race like Paris-Roubaix. You need to have teammates for as long as possible. Is that what your role will be tomorrow?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm good at position. I've learned that well from the guys, and so hopefully I can be there in the crucial parts. The race is always split up, so you're not always relying on a car to give you spare wheels or whatever, and there's always a lot of mechanical problems in the race. If they have good luck, they won't need me tomorrow, but if anything happens, I hope I can be there to help them.
That's the important thing. I mean, you take a lot from the team when they lead you out in stage races like the Tour de France, but here, is it a chance for you to give something back?
Absolutely. If a race is flat, then normally I have to stay there and try and sprint the end. The guys give 100% for me. If it's hilly, I give what I can early on, but in the crucial parts, I can never be there. And this is the type of race that, I'm not going to get a result, and so I can at least, pay the guys back, do what I can in the crucial parts of the race for them. Thanks.
Enjoy it. George, last week your team was pretty much the team that chased down Cancellara. What do you think about the other teams who didn't chase?
Well, yeah, that's definitely been a topic of conversation all week. We're trying not to focus on the other teams. We had the numbers there. We were going for the win. It's the Tour of Flanders. You can't give up with 30 kilometers to go. So we decided to sacrifice our guys and put ourselves, our leaders, in the contention to win. We didn't pull it off, but we were happy with the team effort.
Well, you finishing top 10, in fact, 6th on the day. Does that give you confidence for today?
It does. I wasn't on a great day. I was crawling back after every move, but I managed to keep coming back and still had good legs at the end. With the exception of Cancellara, I was as good as anybody in that breakaway. It was just a matter of who got lucky in the final move there. So I'm confident and feel good. I just need to have good luck.
That's a race where you've always wanted a strong team around you. The team showed last week they were strong. Is that what's important to win Paris-Roubaix, to have numbers at the end?
Absolutely. It's very important. It's such a race of attrition. The tactics come into play at the end of the race. So the more guys you have at the end, the higher possibility you have to win.
Also, last question, you had a couple of nasty crashes during the week. Is that going to affect you?
No, hope not. It was affecting me the day after for sure, but I feel better now. Thank you.
Geraint Thomas, after your performance last week, I'm hearing that you've been elected up to team joint leader.
Yeah, well, I heard it all on Twitter and the media first, but no, I think Fletcher's still, for me, like, you know, the main man. But yeah, they've said I've got more of like a free role and whatever. And yeah, we've got a strong team and a few cards to play anyway. So we'll just see how it pans out.
Well, cast my mind back to the Tour de France last year, the stage over the cobbles, and last week, Tour of Flanders. You've proven yourself to be a cobbles rider.
Yeah, hopefully. And yeah, I just enjoy the racing and that style of racing. And fortunately, it's been something I'm pretty good at, I think. So yeah, last Sunday was amazing, and hopefully I'll have similar feelings this week.
Do you think it's anything to do with your track background or the way you pedal that allows you to cruise over the cobblestones like that?
I think so. I think maybe just, you know, they're just like 2-3 minute sort of efforts really, and I think it's just like a pursuit sort of like blast across them. And I think especially tomorrow, it's got to have the fitness to recover, but I think I've got the power to get over them. So it just depends how I recover and how I keep going, I guess. But yeah, I think that's the main thing really.
I've always said that to do well in Paris-Roubaix or the Tour of Flanders, you've got to be specially motivated for these races. They are special races. You've got to keep the motivation there. Can you do it?
I think so. I hope so. It's you know, I grew up as a kid watching these races, and always dreamt of being in them. And last week was just I was just so excited to be there in the front, especially at the end like that. And yeah, hopefully I can just be a bit more controlled this time and a bit more of a level head, and hopefully I'll be in a similar sort of position pretty soon. Cheers, thanks a lot.
You had a bloody fantastic ride last week.
Cheers, thanks.
Some of the bloody, and I was Tyler, Garmin-Cervelo's got a lot of riders who've got a very good chance of winning Paris-Roubaix. What's the tactic going to be? Is it all for one, or is it all going to be for Thor Hushovd?
Yeah, I think going into tomorrow, Thor's our #1 man. He has the Palmares here with second and a third the last 2 years. He has good form. He's the reigning world champion. I think he deserves our support.
But you're a rider over the last couple of years. You've become more than a sprinter. You are a one-day classics rider. Have you no burning desire to win Paris-Roubaix as well?
Yeah, of course I have that desire. But, you know, there's still a lot of years left for me. And, you know, to ride to help Tour win this year is a very good learning experience. And, you know, we'll see how it goes in the years to come.
Coming up to the strategic points of cobblestones, will we see Garmin-Cervelo at the front pacing Thor Hushovd to get him into the right position?
Yeah, I mean, Paris-Roubaix is a race that is won a lot on position or lost on position. You know, if you come into the Forest of Arenberg in 50th position, probably not going to be at the front at the end of the day. So, you know, we'll do our best to put him where he needs to be.
And what about Heinrich Hausler? Because he's also a pretty phenomenal rider and he's on good form.
Yeah, we have a really strong team with Thor, with Heinrich, with myself, with Andreas, with Johan. I mean, the list is long. So.
Yeah, but doesn't that make it a bit complicated sometimes to sort out the tactics?
Yeah, it can. It has been in a few of the races, but you know, I think we've learned our lesson, and we're not going to try and go into this one with multiple leaders or multiple objectives. You know, we have one overriding goal, and that's to put Thor in the front. Thanks.
Well, Fabian, a lot of time to talk and to think during the week, but that's all behind us now. It's Paris-Roubaix.
Yeah, definitely. It's Paris-Roubaix. It's the hell of a north. It's just a beautiful bike race. I just want to ride my bike, live the passion from the race, enjoy, but it's going to be hard, it's going to be tough, but I think I'm ready. I mean, I've seen my form is there, and yeah, I will just do my best with my team until to the finish line.
The difference between Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix is that last week there was a team of 7 riders together. They chased you down, but Paris-Roubaix is not like that. There's not big numbers in the final.
Well, I mean, there's big numbers. I mean, there's a lot of riders are going well, and depends the tactic, depends the race, how it goes, the wind, and there's a lot of things that counts in this race. I mean, the luck you need, not only for the race tactics, the race situation, but also for crashes or even for punches. I mean, in this race, you never know in which corner what could happen. We will be aware for everything. We are ready, and yeah, we just race our race, and we do what we can until we die.
There's one thing, do you get concerned about the possibility that some teams might ride to try and just make you lose?
I mean, you know, we race our race and hope everyone else will also race their race. I mean, I'm not the only one that wants to win this Paris-Roubaix. I think there's a bunch of riders There's a lot of riders that want to win, and I think only to be on my wheel, I think that's will be not the only solution. I mean, there's other ones, and I'm not looking only for myself. I'm looking what's also going around, but we are ready, and that's what counts.
Final question: this weather, it's strange for Paris-Roubaix. It's almost like the Tour of France. It's summertime. Will that affect everybody's tactics?
Well, I mean, we had already in Flanders really warm weather. We had the whole week warm weather. For sure that it's going to be dusty. It's going to be a tough one. It's going to be a hard one, like in 07 when O'Grady won. I'm looking really lovely back on this day when he won, and but now it's 2011. There's a new race, it's a new day, and we are ready, and we go in and fight like gladiators.
Talking to a couple of the guys in the team, they feel tomorrow that they're all going to ride for you. They're going to honour your World Champions jersey, and they want to get you into the position to possibly win Paris-Roubaix. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, our goal tomorrow is to ride everything for me, and I think that's now how everything is now. It's our biggest chances, so we will do everything we can to, of course, win the race, and with this team we have, I think we have a chance.
This is a race that you have a special motivation for, and wearing the World Champions jersey on your shoulders should make it an even more special day.
Yeah, I mean, even with or without this rainbow jersey, for me, it's one of the biggest one-day races out there, and I dreamed for many years to win this race, and I tried many times, and I'm getting closer and closer. So this year, I will just do everything I can to win it and just do the right things during the race, and then I'm quite sure that will be not far.
Everybody says Garmin-Cervelo is becoming one of the top one-day race teams, and you brought on board a guy like Peter van Petergem. Is that a big advantage to have him in the car in a race like Paris-Roubaix?
For sure, yeah. I mean, Peter van Petergem, he have a big knowledge of these races up here in the north, so he help us with advices and what to do on important moments. So I'm sure it's a big advantage, but still you need the legs for win races. It's not the boss in the car who decide or your helpers. You need one guy who can make it happen.
And what about the little bit of a battle between Fabian Cancellara and Tom Boonen? Will you sit back and watch that or take advantage of it?
I don't know. I have to race tomorrow with open eyes and just be awake if something happened, and then have to see what's going on when we're getting close to the final. Yeah, thanks.
And what is a beautiful day here in Roubaix, awaiting the arrival of the 109th running of the race from Paris to Roubaix, although it starts at the town of Compiègne. Famous for its sections of cobbled roads, 27 sections of them. When we join the action, will be round about section number 20. As the riders wind their way through northern France, heading towards the Belgian borders, where they'll finish in the Velodrome at Roubaix. Hello everybody, I'm Phil Liggett, and joined in commentary by Paul Sherwin. That's the route the riders face, and a glorious early summer's day in Europe, as it has been for about a week now, which means the cobblestones will be dry, which will be appreciated by the riders, but also extremely dusty. As we join the peloton down there, preoccupied at the moment by a small group of 8 riders ahead, but only by a few seconds now, and they've never really been out of reach of the peloton. Very unusual, Paul, for a breakaway not to establish early on, but it hasn't today.
I think everybody's very nervous because of the weather conditions this afternoon, because they know this is going to be a very fast Paris-Roubaix, and they don't want to break away to get clear.
Well, as we look down at the peloton now, we've joined the riders at the front here, just on the front, setting the pace for Europe cars, the Canadian rider, David Velliot. And the breakaway consisting of David Boucher, Martin Elmiger, the Swiss rider, Jimmy Engelvent, Jean Payani, Mitchell Docker, the Australian, is in here. He's having a good start to the day, as he did in the Tour de Flanders last week. Nelson Oliveira, David Vellieux, and also Timon Sobert of the little-known NetApp team, which has been given a wild-card entry. And I must say, nobody knows quite why.
Well, I have to say the probable reason that they've been included is because it's a new German team, and they're trying to support German cycling, which over the last couple of years has had a little bit of a difficult time.
There's Elminger displaying his colours as national champion in the Swiss colours with the white cross. Sitting at the back here is Mitchell Docker, the Australian, really warming to the occasion of top-class pro cycling this year. Major sectors of the race, the 27 sectors with the 5-starred sectors still to come. 5 stars are the hardest sections of cobblestones, and the slightly changed route as we exit the Forest of Ardenberg this year, turning to the right instead of to the left. Into Solem now, as the peloton aren't going to be too concerned about the names in that front group just yet.
No, I think they've got it pretty much pegged here this afternoon, Phil. We're looking at a 55-second advantage, 142 kilometres to go. We've covered 4 sections of cobblestone so far, including the first very dramatic ones at Troisville, and the longest section of the race from Kievy to Saint-Piton, a distance of 3.7 kilometres. But I think these guys will start to wind it up, and they always do when they start to get a little bit closer to the Forest of Arenberg. And as you mentioned this year, one of the reasons why they've actually changed direction at the Forest of Arenberg is to prevent the race from coming back together.
Yes, well, after last week's performance in the Tour of Flanders, which is Belgium's equivalent of Paris-Roubaix, they're bringing back George Hincapie here at the moment. We've just heard he had a flat tyre, and his whole team looks as though they've dropped back, Team BMC, to bring him back into the peloton. Well, if you're going to have problems, and most people do on this race, it's good to have them early on, right?
Certainly, especially at this point, because we're actually between 2 sections of cobbles about to go through the feeding station at Solem, and that's why I think George Hincapie, if it's the only bad luck he has today, I think he'll be rather happy.
This is the team car here of Leopard Trek, and there is the man who leads the team, last year's winner, Fabian Cancellara. Taking time out, he won't be too concerned at this stage. There's still an awful long way to race. 141 kilometres to go. He's going to have a bike change.
Well, there's no panic at all from Fabian Cancellara. He takes the bottle off her, makes sure that he keeps himself topped up with fluids. In fact, last week in the Tour of Flanders, he was complaining because this really is the first serious heat in Europe, and a lot of the riders complaining that they weren't able to keep themselves topped up with fluids.
No, it is actually tipped to hit 23 or 24 degrees Celsius today, which, if you're still thinking Fahrenheit, is about 74 degrees Fahrenheit. Absolutely beautiful day for the spectators, although I think most spectators, fair to say, Paul, would like it to be cold and rainy, so the riders will have to hit those cobblestones glacial and will come out the other end covered in mud.
Yeah, there are actually 1 or 2 riders who would like the weather to be rather less clement than it is here, because some riders feel that they've got a psychological advantage when they're racing over the cobblestones because they handle the slippery cobblestones a lot better than others.
Nelson Oliveira here for team at Radio Shack, having a very, very good start to the season. Radio Shack, and they're just coming off another big win in the Tour of Pays Basque with Cloden, and in fact getting a 1-2 there. Chris Horner taking second place, having won that event last year. Obviously, that race only finished in Spain yesterday, so a different team competing here in Paris-Roubaix. And as you can see, when the peloton concertina is up into a big pack like this, they're not too concerned about the breakaway. They're throwing off all the bottles for souvenirs out to the crowd, only keeping on board what they like.
I don't think that is actually environmentally unfriendly, because if you can see the spectators there, Phil, they dash to pick up those bottles as souvenirs for themselves.
Mark Cavendish here. Now, I think he might have had a problem as well. He's trying to get back. He's choosing the right car to pace behind. This is the chief referee's car here, so they can't complain about that. Cavendish making his debut today in Paris-Roubaix, a race he's always wanted to ride.
Well, that's one thing he said last week, Phil, when he was at the start of the Tour of Flanders. He just knows these bike races. He's watched them since he was a young guy, and he's wanted to participate. And it's taken him quite some time to come through to Paris-Roubaix.
So Cavendish will have no problems this time getting back in. He must have had a flat tyre to be that far behind, but he's on the back of the peloton now. Still fighting a little bit to find his top form of a couple of years ago. Last year he had problems with his teeth. It's kept him out of the winner's podium for a while, but he found his legs at mid-term as somebody takes a flyer off the front here from Amiga Farmer Lotto.
Well, everybody now starting to get themselves into the right position. This is what Paris-Roubaix is all about. It's about positioning leading up to the cobblestone sections, and sometimes, in fact, it's the race the last kilometre before.
Look at this. It's Andre Greipel, which is the arch sprint rival, and they were teammates last year of Mark Cavendish. He must have heard Cavendish was behind.
Well, I'm not sure that would be the situation. He here really knows we've gone through the feeding section at Solem. What he wants to do now is try and get himself into a good position for section number 23 to go. The section from Vertin to Saint-Martin-sur-Escalon. And that's a distance of 2.3 kilometers.
Yes, from now on into the finish, the race zigzags through the northern France countryside in the area of Pas de Calais, and the crowd can take an opportunity here using known shortcuts to see the race on a number of occasions. Some of the roads are so bad they won't allow any of the vehicles behind to go down those roads, so the riders quite literally are on their own for a short section of cobblestone before they rejoin the route where the cars will wait for them. And gradually they'll make the way to the stadium, which is bathed in warm sunshine today. Sitting on the front here, Rabobank.
Well, again, one or two riders taking the opportunity to try and get off the front before the next section of cobbles. Once we start to get into this bike race, there are sections of cobblestones almost every 10 kilometers. The plan of the organization here, Phil, is to try and preserve at least 50 kilometers of cobblestones within the last 150 kilometers of the race, just so that Paris-Roubaix can retain the standing that it's got as a very special race.
Looks like we've got Bert de Backer of Skill Shimano's joined that little group at the front there. He won't do much because he's got his teammate Mitchell Docker, the Australian, in there as we hit the section of cobblestones here at Vertin. It's given 3 stars out of a top level of 5, 2.3 kilometers. And you can see the dust already coming up. This becomes most unpleasant, especially on the eyes if you're forced to follow somebody's back wheel.
Yeah, but it also gives a chance to ride at much higher speeds than you can when the conditions are wet and slippery, and these guys will take serious risks. But even in the dry, these cobblestones made out of granite rock can be extremely smooth, so when you go around one or two of the corners with this little thin covering of dust on the top of them, it can make them pretty slippery too.
As Martin Elminger setting the pace at the front here, is a very, very good Swiss cyclist. He's done well in the Tour Down Under in the past. Which is a race he always seems to excel in early in the month of January in Adelaide. Now he swings off to the other side. Now there is a secret of riding these cobbles, aren't there, Paul?
No, the best way, the ideal way, is actually to ride in the middle, because you can see the two riders riding on the left and the right-hand side of the road. Well, in fact, that's the worst part to ride on, because you've got much more chance of getting small stones into your tyres and getting a flat tyre. So the ideal place, really, if you've got the strength, is to ride on the crown of the cobblestones.
There's the peloton now entering the same sector here, almost having to queue up to get round the very narrow road straight into the section of cobblestones. If you've got ambition, you really do need to be on the front when we get to the section of the Forest of Arenberg, because that's when things go wrong heavily for riders. It's called the Arenberg Trench, and it comes at 172 kilometers.
Yeah, the important thing about the Forest of Arenberg, Phil, it's not necessarily where you win Paris-Roubaix, but certainly in the past many riders have lost Paris-Roubaix on that section of cobblestones. It's a long, nasty section of cobblestones, and to me it's probably the most important first strategic point of the race, coming at 172 kilometres into the race and just inside of 80 to go to the finish.
Just about 55 seconds of the gap between the peloton and the 8 riders who got away as they entered the first sector of cobblestones. They had a small lead of 20 seconds as they got to Troisville at 98 kilometres. Really, most surprising pattern today. Riders tried to break, but the peloton would not allow anybody to escape off the front. 3 riders still dangling off the front there. Started that move by André Greipel.
Well, the 2 riders joining him, Kevin de Kort and Goraz Stangelai, the rider from Astana. They've got themselves that advantage, but you can see the organisation now on the front is coming from Team Saxo Bank. Fresh off a victory last week, a very good victory in the Tour of Flanders, going to Guy Newlands.
Nick Newlands, absolutely. Well, he played the tactics right. He knew there was an in-battle there between Tom Bonen and Fabian Cancellara, and he profited from that. And you can't blame him for that. He's a very, very good one-day rider, and he's not new to winning big one-day races, but that was without doubt the best win of his career. There's the little chase group trying to sort things out, but the peloton won't let them get too far, I don't think. There is a gentle wind blowing across the race at the moment, but quite honestly, it is an idyllic day. You can't really see the wind as a factor today.
No, this really reminds me a little bit of the weather conditions that the race had when Stuart O'Grady won way back in 2004, coming out through the dust. It really was a dramatic ride on that occasion. It was very complicated because the motorbikes had changed position, and all of a sudden there was a guy coming out through the dust, and we recognized it as O'Grady flying to a lone victory.
So Andre Geipel led de Court, and Stangelay are the three riders trying to chase them at the moment.
Well, they've only got a 10-second advantage over the front end of the main field. I don't think it's going to be too long before they're pulled back into the fold. The main field, I don't think, will start to really put the hammer down on this event until we get closer to that Forest of Arenberg. But it's been a very fast race. Normally, in the past, this race field is dominated by an early morning breakaway. But I think everybody was so attentive, they didn't want to give too much of an advantage for a group before they got to the first section of cobblestones in Troisville.
Well, there's the full spread for you now. A minute 10 to the three poursuivants, which are the chasers, and a minute 20 to the peloton itself. So they're holding on to their advantage just now. As I say, it's going to be an in-battle that will develop, and I think it'll start to develop mainly once we get to the Forest of Arenberg. And they won't worry about the whereabouts of the breakaway till then, but it's clearly not making great progress. Nice to see that the rapeseed is off to the right, looking proudly yellow, the colour, of course, of the leader's jersey of the Tour de France. And this organisation is the very same organisation that organises the Tour de France, whereas the Tour is over 3 weeks. This is their classic one-day race. And, well, you very rarely get a lucky winner in Paris-Roubaix.
But you also very often, Phil, get a lot of riders who've had bad luck and had to fight their way back into the event because of either flat tyres, crashes, accidents, getting left behind on certain sections of cobblestones. And you have to have that determination when you start Paris-Roubaix, because you know when you get out of bed in the morning, you're going to have at least some form of bad luck out on the course.
Yes, even though these bikes are tailor-made, in fact, for the cobblestones, a special adaptation, even the handlebars are extra padding there to stop the blisters forming. You can spend half an hour on these cobblestones, and boy, when you look at your hands after you finish riding them, they're often bleeding.
You can see the difficulty at the back. A lot of these riders, especially the riders from Euskaltel-Euskadi here in the orange jersey, these riders are a much slighter build than some of the big guys from Belgium and Holland, and they have a hard time because, in fact, they bounce all over these cobblestone sections.
Interesting now to see Saxo Bank. They seem to have taken charge of this. Orders have gone out for Saxo Bank, having had the benefit of success. A little bit of a moral victory, I would have thought, last week in the Tour of Flanders for Bjarne Riis, the manager of Saxo Bank, because the riders who have formed Leopard Trek, which include Fabian Cancellara and Stuart O'Grady, were all part of Saxo Bank last year, and Leopard Trek were the favourites to win and in the Tour of Flanders, and it was Saxo who pulled it off with Nick Nguyen. So I would think Bjarne Riis, being a modest man, said nothing, but I would think inwardly he was pretty content.
But basically, if you cast your mind back, it was actually set up by the final acceleration of Fabian Cancellara, because Tom Bonen was just about to make the junction in the last 400 or 500 metres, and it was Cancellara who put the hammer down, facilitating that victory for Nick Nguyen's.
Yes, Nick gambled and it paid. Minute 10 seconds, that's the gap to the peloton at the moment, as we get a rather pleasant view of this area of northern France. The villages come thick and fast in this region. We're heading towards the coal mine, which was the coal mine centre, and now we'll see the pits as we enter into the Forest of Arenberg shortly. But that is a large peloton down there at the moment. We swing back to see Nelson Oliveira from Radio Shack setting the pace, quickly being relieved here as another rider comes through. I think it's Jimmy Engelvon who's just gone through there now. And sitting at the back for Europcar is the Canadian Velo.
One of the development riders who came through on Steve Bauer's squad and rode exceptionally well in the Tour of Missouri last year. I think Steve Bauer's done an exceptional job in Canada to develop what he hopes will be an international Canadian professional cycling team in the near future.
Yes, absolutely right. And Steve Bauer, well, one of his most famous races, which he didn't win. He's had the closest finish to the quick-step rider in trouble here, but it's not Tom Bonen. Or is it? No, in fact, it's not. The rider is, it's Goddard. No, it's not Goddard.
No, it looks like it's Chavanel, actually.
You're right, it is too. Sylvain Chavanel, who's He was the hero last week, chased down originally by his own teammate, Tom Bonan, but there was no animosity at the finish, which I was rather surprised about. We were with the Quick-Step team about an hour after the finish on the way back towards our boat across the channel and chatting with Patrick Lefevre. There seemed to be no animosity. The riders were friendly, having a snack before they set off for the airport at Brussels, and I was surprised. But at the end of the day, Chavanel did snatch an extremely welcome second place. Almost a victory for France, who haven't won that race since 1992.
I think that was Jackie Hardy who won on that occasion as well. A great
Jackie Durand.
Jackie Durand, a long breakaway by him. And as we see this organisation at the front end of the main field, these guys now, they know that later on in this event, Phil, they will get caught. As we go back to look at Sylvain Chavanel. Chavanel had a fine pair of legs on him last week and really was an exceptionally strong rider. But these guys at Quick-Step knew that if they wanted to beat Fabian Cancellara, they had to go out and attack him. And I think that's why, first of all, they launched Chavanel, and then afterwards, they were hoping that Tom Bonan could ride across to Chavanel and get himself the victory. It didn't work on that occasion, but they have admitted they've got a special plan for today.
Well, they're saying he's sitting on the best form of his career, Sylvain Chavanel, so I suspect he's put the same legs on today, and we'll see, because he really is confident he can do a ride in this event, and he's been given the honour of being co-leader of Quick-Step, because a lot of people here, because we're in France, are saying there's more value in the advertising of Quick-Step if the French rider was to win rather than Tom Bonan. But remember, if Tom Bonan does win today, that'll give him 4 victories in history, and that puts him level with Roger de Vlamingh, with a chance that he could go 5 in the years ahead.
Well, looking at the star ratings of all the riders this morning, the man who has more stars than anyone else with a 4-star chance of winning this race is Fabian Cancellara, but that's in the French press. Now, if you read the Belgian press at the start of the day, Phil, they are all talking about Tom Bonan, saying that he's actually sitting on some very good form. Yeah. And it's a completely different race, the effort and the energy that you need in Paris-Roubaix to the kind of efforts that you have to produce in the Tour of Flanders, which has its cobblestone sections, but most of those are uphill.
Sector 22 we are on now, which is 1.7 kilometres long. Capelle-sur-Caillon is this stretch of cobblestones. Remember, we're counting down. The last sector is number 1, and it's just on the outskirts of the velodrome. It's a little courtesy farewell sector, very smooth cobblestones, and just outside the velodrome here in Roubaix.
Well, Martin Elmer, you see just on the right-hand side in the red jersey there. He's a champion of Switzerland. You can see the white cross on the middle. He's almost riding a cyclocross, riding in the dirt at the side of the road. But it's a big, dangerous thing to do there, because you've got much more chance of having an accident flipping onto the cobbles and off, because there's nearly always a slight difference in height between the side of the cobbles and the actual cobblestone section itself.
Well, it's 50 seconds they're saying, but I don't think, I was saying 120 to the peloton, but I'm not sure that gap exists now, because they've just swung on to that same sector of cobblestones here. They'll race very hard to get into those narrow entries onto these cobble sections, and then once they're there, they hold their position, because there's not much opportunity for movement in the peloton at this stage, but you've got to be careful. Riders make a mistake, you see 1 or 2 bunny hopping the stones. If they make a mistake there, they'll take out half of the big pack.
Yeah, but this is also a very difficult section technically as well, because this is a section with some up and downhill in it as they roll through these fields in the northern part of France, and that's why you have to be very careful, and that's why there's always a big battle to ride in the first 15 to 20 places as you go onto the cobblestone sections, because 9 times out of 10 the crashes are in the back half of the field.
Mitchell Docker here, looking very content with his first venture into hell today. And the cars behind also have to be wary of riders coming up now. This is Greipel leading the second chase group on the road.
Well, Greipel's a man to create a bit of a surprise on a day like this, because he's much more regarded as there's a crash that we were waiting for. There's the world champion as well, right in the middle, Thor Hushovd, and that's why all of these guys know this is a very nasty technical section.
Exactly what we were talking about. Leopard Trek rider is also stopped on the road there, and I wasn't sure, but it might have said number 1 on his back, in which case it was Cancellara. New bike required for AG2R. Now this is when it gets a bit tough, because the front end of the peloton is racing away here now, And this is quite chaotic just at the moment.
Well, this is because this is probably the worst part of the cobblestones. Looking over there, you can see Bjorn Lukemans from Vacansoleil, number 91 on the left-hand side, and he's been caught right at the back end of the pack. So that indicates that wasn't a bad move by Andre Greipel to get clear before this section. Now, this is a section which, as I said, Phil, is extremely nasty with a combination of cobblestones, a little bit of tarmac to have a smooth surface, and riders jumping and bouncing around to try and get to the smoothest part of the course, and that's probably what provoked that accident.
Yes, and you're going to have to use a lot of energy now to rejoin the peloton. And Bjorn Lukemans, he's a man for Paris-Roubaix, rode extremely well last week in the Tour of Flanders, top 6 finish for him there, and has finished 4th in this event in the past, so he likes this event.
Well, this is the group you can just see slightly off the front end of the main field. This is the group of Andre Greipel. He's joined there by Boucher, who also rides for the same team. He's a Frenchman on Omega Pharma Lotto. Kevin de Court is in there for skill. And just sitting on the back there, of course, Goraz Stangelai of Team Astana. But for them, they avoided the accident that has really lacerated this main field.
Well, Boucher was with the leading group, but he got shot off on sector 24, and he's picked up by Greipel's group there. So there's 7 leaders still in front. Astana playing a very prominent role in those turquoise-coloured jerseys at the moment. 40 seconds is the gap. The peloton doesn't seem to be pushing home any advantage from that crash at the moment.
Well, that's Jalingi, the man sitting on the front there from Team Rabobank. He's a member of that early breakaway of 7, what is down to 7 riders. He is a strong bike rider, and this is a good attempt here by the Rabobank riders to create a bit of a surprise here this afternoon. That's Stangelai just swinging off the front there.
Oh, there's the spread at minute 25 across the peloton. It's been like this for some kilometres now as far as the peloton's been concerned. Stangelai trying to get Greipel and Koen de Court up there. I don't know whether David Boucher will have the legs once he gets up there now. He's on the way back. And you can see if it was windy and wet, so the sort of devastation the weather could cause to this race, but at the moment it's just a dust storm and it's very unpleasant inside the heart of the peloton. You literally can't see where you're going.
You might have noticed a team car on the side of the road where, well, normally you are supposed to be serviced from the back of the race in your own team car, but the teams have a strategy in an event like Paris-Roubaix, and they put people out on the course with spare bikes and spare machines because they know that if there's been an accident, as we've just seen, the actual team cars can be as much as 3 and 4 minutes behind.
So as they turn right off the course, the last man on this peloton is the British rider Jeremy Hunt, riding for Team Sky. So I suspect that he too has had a little bit of a problem in that delay on the cobbles. But you can see by the speed of the peloton now, these boys are getting down to business. They're all racing towards the Forest of Arneberg. It's not the next cobblestones. That's at Aulnoy, which is near Valenciennes, is next. Quite a long section of 2.6 kilometres.
Well, they've actually got a bit of respite now as well, Phil, because they've gone through that section of cobblestones at Capelle-sur-Écaillon. They've got round about 16 kilometres now before the next section, so that's probably why some of these riders at the front end of the main field are trying to take the advantage of what's happened just a little bit further back on the road.
So Jangli still, again, another man who rode extremely well in the early stages of the Flanders last week. He's been the workhorse for Rabobank to date. These are the legs of Nelson Oliveira of Radio Shack, and this is the champion of Switzerland, Martin Elmiger, former winner of the Santos Tour Down Under in Australia. Jangli has really flowered since he came across from Skilled Shimano onto a top World Tour team.
Well, coming across the gap now is that group of Andre Greipel, because they've pegged that advantage down to 35 seconds. So they're eating into the advantage of the 7-man leading group, probably because of the presence of David Boucher, who's a teammate of Andre Greipel in that group, who's probably going to try and sacrifice himself for his team leader, because Greipel, he's a man built for this kind of race.
Ooh. And there's been a crash here. We didn't catch it, but somebody obviously didn't make that corner and overshot it. This is Mathieu Landanu.
Yeah, and he's got a back flat tyre. You can just see the way the back end of the car is slipping around.
Yeah.
And as I said, even in these dry conditions, it can be extremely slippery in a race like this.
Well, it was a Saxo Bank rider, clearly, but I couldn't read his number. and left to sort it out. It looks as though they were quite hurt there, but they should recover and remount. Now these are desperate moments. This is the first desperate moment we've seen since the race begun. Now this is a pressure point, I think. 126 kilometres, still a long way to go with all of the real obstacles ahead of the riders. Very anxious to try and get something moving now.
Oh, and interesting to see Astana being extremely aggressive. They started today with 2 Australians on the start line, Alan Davis and Simon Clark, but probably the man most likely to give out some pain for this team later on is Thomas Weitkus.
Well, this is one terrific turn at the front here. There's the spread of the peloton. We've still got, up the road, we've still got 4 riders chasing a leading group of 7. But you can throw a blanket over them, and the riders know this. They're just waiting for a moment when they might be able to consolidate a move.
Well, if this race is going to be tactically similar to that one of last week, the Tour of Flanders, we're about to witness an extremely aggressive race. It was one of the fastest Tour of Flanders I've seen, and there's a lot of riders in this race, Paris-Roubaix today, Phil, who want to get some revenge from their performances of a week ago.
Well, I guess in the old days this road was also cobbled, but nowadays it's been given a nice topping, and the organisers are very concerned about losing the cobbled roads of northern France. So many of the roads are protected now, and I suppose the ambitions of the organisers to keep at least 50 kilometres of cobblestones in every event. Today we're going to see 51.5 kilometres worth.
And that's around about 31.5 miles of cobblestones in the last 3 hours of racing. Now, this is Martin Janglet again on the front. Just over on the left-hand side, that blue and white jersey you might just have caught a glimpse of is that's the Team Net app, a team that was brought in as a wildcard team, and they are actually a new German continental team here at the moment, hoping to break their way into the big time.
The green jerseys, by the way, is the new team on the block, Europcar. They'll be riding in the Tour de France this year. So one of the riders who did slip off in that crash for Saxo Bank, it's been confirmed it was Jonas Jorgensen of Denmark who went down there.
That hand up there is an indication that somebody else has got a mechanical incident, slipping back.
Yeah, this is an Astana rider.
It looks like it's Simon Clark, actually. It is Simon Clark. He stopped at the side of the road. One of the 2 Aussies in Team Astana.
So Simon Clark, another rider who is also developing to become one of the elite Australians. He's now finding the other side of Paris-Roubaix, which are the punctures, and he really knows that sooner or later it's going to happen. You just want to get him out of the way early on. He's still plenty of chance to recover from this. The biggest problem is not rejoining the field. It's getting back to the front of the race before you enter the next stretch of cobblestones.
Notice Stuart O'Grady riding to the front end, former winner of Paris-Roubaix, and he's looking to see whether or not he can support Fabian Cancellara here this afternoon, because Cancellara is dreaming about winning this event for a second time.
Sepp Meris is where we are right now. Tight left-hand bend here. Cofidis also willing to put some weight behind it. They're a team of the region here, Cofidis. It's credit by telephone sponsorship, but they're based here in northern France. Heading to the hometown of Roubaix as we get another glimpse here now of number 31, Matthew Goss, the winner of Milan-San Remo. Not too sure where Matthew is at the moment, but I suspect he is at the front of the race rather than the back, trying to get clear.
Well, a lot of these riders have put a lot of faith into Matthew Goss. He's had an extremely good start to the season, Phil, and as you can see, this race is splitting up quite dramatically.
20 seconds ago. I'm not too sure he is at the front. I think he might be being brought back after a puncture there, because I think he might be at the back of the race.
Yes, I think we're going into a moment now when the main field is going to slow down for a fraction to start to get themselves organised before we get through to the little bit more challenging sections of cobblestones.
123 kilometres to go. It's a long way. As we see now, riders of the Garmin Cervelo move also. They've got some good riders in that race today. Tyler Farrow would like to produce a result. This is the breakaway. This is the chasing group. Number 60 there was in the breakaway. He got dispatched to the back on one of the stretches of cobblestones. Cobble section 24. He went backwards, David Boucher. but it's not too far. Now another puncture on the right of the road here. Now they are coming thick and fast at the moment. That was another Leopard Trek rider, Paul, and I think that was Dominique Clemmer who was stopped changing his tyres.
Well, I've always said, Phil, about this race, you will always have a certain amount of bad luck. This man has had big bad luck because number 91, Bjorn Lukemans, was tipped by a number of riders as being a man who could get himself into the top 10 at the end of the day. He's currently on the back foot up against the rails in the boxing ring and trying to fight himself back into this race. And this is big Gert Stegemans as well, a man who supposedly was the co-leader of Quick-Step with Chavanel and Tom Bonen.
Well, he's come back to Quick-Step this year. He left Radio Shack last year, rejoined Quick-Step, where he was once the lead-out man for Tom Bonen. He's obviously had problems. They all have. We're at the back of the race here. There's Bjorn Lukemans, delayed in that Sector 22 crash, now making his way back up towards the peloton. It's a busy time for a lot of riders very early on today.
Nobody's holding anything back, even at this section of the race, Phil, at 122 kilometres to go. They're throwing complete caution to the wind because they realise that this is going to be a big race once we get up towards the very difficult section of cobblestones after they've been through Valenciennes towards the forest of Arenberg.
Quick glimpse of the sprinter there, Luca Paolini. He could certainly be a man to reckon with if he gets to the sprint finish in Roubaix, where the crowd is already filling the stadium and watching the action on a big screen.
A little bit misleading, this time gap here. It's saying the chase group is still at 5 seconds. Well, it's not anymore because there is, on the left-hand side, Andre Greipel. He's made the junction, and so we're now looking at an 11-man leading group.
Indeed we are.
Yep, so Jangale, he's over on the left-hand side of the road in the orange jersey of Rabobank. He was very aggressive last week, but this is an interesting situation now, Phil, when you get a man like Andre Greipel into a move with a 1.5 minute advantage over the front end of the main field. Some of the main contenders really need to sit up and pay attention.
125. I'll tell you, that gap is locked in at 125 to the point of not believing the computer anymore because it's never altered. But the breakaway has merged with the leaders, that's for sure. 11 strong riders, especially the addition of Andre Greipel. This is a very good move by Greipel, and it's done on purpose, of course, to soften up the leaders, I think, in favour of riders back in the main field yet to come through. Adam Hansen, the Australian, who was on HTC.
Oh, another crash over on the left.
And somebody around the corner as well. These are happening in amazingly strange places.
Well, it's a chaos. It's the pressure of the race here this afternoon, Phil. Riders are battling to stay at the front end of the main field. They'll be taking 1 or 2 risks at getting around the corners. And as I said a little earlier, even in dry conditions, this race can be very slippery. And we're getting a chance here to see the chaos at the back, and another man goes down.
Well, he just lost his front wheel. It's got to be the dust on the road because the roads are so dry. There's a lot of dust caused by the riders themselves, and they're losing a grip on it, as simple as that.
Well, that accident actually happened.
2 riders at the same time.
He actually had to change his line going round that corner. The chaos at the back as the riders are trying to manoeuvre their way around the following team cars. The rider in front changed his line, and as you try to change your line too much with the front wheel, then you're bound to go down.
Just as they were rejoining the race in the previous problem, they're all got to go through it all again. That is absolutely typical of Paris-Roubaix, though.
That's not affecting these guys at all, though, Phil, in this leading group of what is now 10 riders. Veilleux is the man on the front here for the new Europe car team, and they will just continue to work as much as possible. We get a chance here to look at this crash just one more time. Just watch the way he had to try and pull his wheel back a little bit because that French rider just cut in front of him, and bang, he's gone down.
Well, they're on to Sector 21 here now at Aulnoy. And the gap has come down at last. It's now 1 minute and 15 seconds, so we've lost a digit there.
Well, this is a long section of cobblestones, this one. It's 2.6 kilometres in length, Aulnay-les-Valenciennes all the way to Famars. 142 kilometres covered, 120 kilometres to go to the finish.
Well, the roads are so narrow, and we can hear the referees talking on our earphones here at the finishing line, and they're as confused at times as we are because they can't get close to the riders. It's changing so quickly with continuing riders falling off left and right of the road. They're also delayed, of course. The riders are really on their own at times like this, and they're purposely keeping big pressure on now at the front because they don't want to lose the top positions in the peloton. It can change so quickly. These are the cobblestones now at Aulnoy-les-Valenciennes.
And that's why it's also important to have a large number of teammates with you in sections of cobblestones like that, Phil, because if the team cars are delayed, as they have been already, and are a long way behind the race, at 2 to 3 minutes behind the front end of the peloton, you have to have a teammate in the group with you who's able to pass across a wheel or even a bike if necessary, while you survive, especially if you're a team leader, until the team cars can come back.
Yes, and this is a big entry for Paris-Roubaix. They've selected 27 teams. There's 8 riders on each team. Now, each team is made up where they have a recognised team leader, and the other boys, we call them domestiques or domestiques. They're there to help that team leader be in a position to win this race by the end of the day. So if they see him getting in a spot of bother, they will try and get him out of it if nobody else can. The other problem is that we just caught a glimpse there, Paul, of the helicopter. Now, they try not to fly too close to the riders because of the dust storm they will cause with those rotors, and they certainly wouldn't be too popular with the race.
Well, so far, this has been an extremely fast race, in excess of 42 kilometres an hour, the average speed, and nobody yet really wants to slow down at all. As we look here at the Tête de la Course, the front end of the bike race, this is Stangelai, just here in the blue jersey of Team Astana. And he's no stranger to getting into breakaways. And in fact, a number of years ago, I remember him winning the Commonwealth Bank Cycle Classic in Australia.
That's all. I didn't think you were that old. Yes, he's 38 years of age, believe it or not, Stanley now. And he is the current road racing champion. That's why his jersey is slightly different to the rest of his Astana teammates.
The champion of Slovenia in that dark blue
that's
jersey.
Right.
And this is a workman-like group now here, Phil, getting themselves organised. Everybody prepared to participate because they know if this breakaway can survive and go into the forest of Arenberg with a little bit of an advantage, they've got a chance of finishing high up in the standings when they come to the finish of Paris-Roubaix.
There's the leaders for you now. Greipel having come across with the other riders there. Jangeli, Decourt, Docker, they were always in the break. Oliveira, David Velleur, Stanley came across as well. And
well, this is Boucher sitting on the back. He was in the early morning breakaway and then got himself caught by the chasing group, which just happened to contain one of his own teammates, and that's his teammate on the front there wearing number 51, Andre Greipel, who's not had the stellar start to the season that he might have had last year, but he has changed teams and he's now starting to find himself a little bit of form in the month of April.
Yes, well, last year Greipel won 21 races, and a lot of those, including the overall classification and 3 stages of the Tour Down Under in Australia. He then went to win in Mallorca and the Algarve in Portugal. And in April, he just took a bagload of stages of the Tour of Turkey as well. Now, more trouble here at the back. This looks like his arch rival normally, Mark Cavendish, slipping away there.
Well, Cavendish said he came to this race to get a little bit of experience, to try and understand what it was about, and if possible, try and help the team. And he had promised his team manager, Alan Piper, that he would try and win a stage of the 3 days of La Panne, and if that was going to be the case, then he would allow him to ride Paris-Roubaix as a first tester to find out whether or not he was suitable to a race like this.
Well, we'll wait to see. He looks as though he's riding quite casually at the back there, just not giving anything away with the expression on his face anyway. And there's another problem here at the back now, and this looks as though it might be Heinrich Hausler, who just stopped there, the sprinter. Certainly an HTC rider.
Well, again, this is
Cavendish. Oh, this is back to Cavendish now, yes.
Yeah, Cavendish having some adjustments done to his bike. He's having a very fast learning session about Paris-Roubaix here this afternoon, having to understand it. It is all about determination, a desire to stay in the bike race, and a desire to have the courage to fight back when you do have a spot of bad luck.
Yes, well, Mark, the thing is that these cobblestones, things drop off your bike you never knew you had on them. And it looks as though his handlebars may have come a little bit loose there, trying to sort it out or readjust them, make it a bit more comfortable for him. You can see the extra handlebar tape he's got on there to make it a bit of a softer cushion for the hands.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, Phil, if you talk about events like the East African Safari Rally being the test bed for cars, Paris-Roubaix certainly has to be a test bed for bicycles because it really pushes everything to the extremes.
It certainly does, and things like even the whole gear mechanisms tend to drop off on these cobbled roads because the bikes take a tremendous hammering, and nothing has gone by that isn't to come that's even worse, because we're heading towards Famars now, which is another stretch of 1.2 kilometres, and very soon we'll be into the Arenberg Forest. That comes at sector 16, and we're looking at the moment for sector 20. Remember, we count down.
This is starting to look a little bit more interesting now because these guys are working extremely well together, and they pushed up that time gap to 1 minute and 45 seconds. So they are on a quest, and their quest is to survive over the next 3 sections of cobblestones to get themselves to the outskirts of the Forest of Arenberg, because they know once you've gone through there, then the race starts to get distilled a fraction, and there's not quite so many guys fighting to get into the cobblestone sections first.
That's right, and they haven't been disrupted by the little shunts at the back of the race there. Oh, it is Heinrich Hausler who had a bit of a problem. He's coming up on the outside now.
Well, Team Garmin-Cervelo from the United States have got 3 riders probably capable of winning Paris-Roubaix: Hausler, Tyler Farrar, and of course the world champion Thor Hushovd. But talking to them yesterday at the team presentations, they said that we're all for one man, and that one man is Thor Hushovd, the man who finished 2nd last year.
Well, we're entering sector 21. I must confess, I thought we'd done sector 21, but we're now back onto it here. 1:45. This is a nasty little section here. You can see the dust. This is Elmiger setting the pace. The big Swiss man knows how to ride these cobbles, I feel. One of his big wins last year was, he had 4 wins, by the way, but I would think he'd count the National Road Race title as his best win. He also won the 4 days of Dunkirk, which is actually more than 4 days of Dunkirk, but that's the title they give it. And that's over a lot of cobbled roads as well. So clearly for a Swiss rider, he enjoys the bad roads of northern France.
Well, he's an exceptionally talented rider, and as you can see here, so is Veilleux. He'd be very happy to be in the breakaway for Team Europe car here this afternoon. We are actually on section number 21 at the moment, and it's a long section of cobblestones. It's got a 5-star rating at 2.6 kilometers in length.
Well, Elmiger, he's over 32 years of age now, but he'll be the big experience in this breakaway. As we're seeing the pace taken over by the Canadian rider, Veilleux. Europe car, first season for them in the peloton, and they've got a ride in the Tour de France. The Tour de France actually going to the town of the headquarters of Europe car here in France, so must be a connection there somewhere.
Well, you might have noticed as we look now again, this is what it looks like if you're on the bike at the moment, and it's the speed that these riders go over the cobblestones. In fact, you have to ride over them at high speed, because the faster you go, believe it or not, the smoother the surface gets.
Well, it feels that way anyway, and you get them over with that little bit quicker, but 2.6 kilometers, quite a long way.
Again,
and now here's the peloton, and this is typical. They've entered it, and they've lost the rider immediately.
There's a lot of chaos in Paris-Roubaix. It's all about chaos. It's all about positioning and fighting to stay at the front end of the main field.
Well, that was Arnaud Couillot, who was struggling to put his bike to rights there, and there was a ricochet problem. Another rider stopped as well. They fight to get to the front, and they finish up at the back with one particular problem like that. And the Canadian rider here, Veilleux, is really enjoying this right now.
Well, you can see the dust that's being thrown up. A very dusty afternoon. And this last week has been the hottest in Europe. It's almost summertime weather. And some riders were saying, I wonder why they've organised Paris-Roubaix in the month of July this year.
It's an excellent year, because where we commentate from here at the finish, we are in the shade, but we are in the open air. And we've had many days of being very wet and very cold indeed. But today is very pleasant, except for the riders. Now, we've got something going here now as Cervelo tried to start move on the left of the picture there.
Well, again, you see the crowds are getting themselves out. Some people, in fact, come out to the race here of Paris-Roubaix in their camping cars from Belgium a couple of days in advance to try and get themselves an ideal position on the critical sections of cobbles.
Well, the big rider there looks as though, to me, it's Andreas Clear for Garmin-Cervelo on the left of our picture. He seems to have gone off-road completely now. He's completely spurned the cobbles, found himself a nice stretch of road here.
Well, that's the advantage again, Phil, of riding at the front end of the pack, which is why there's always the big battle to get into these sections in the first positions, because in fact it's a lot easier. You can see in front of you, whereas you see riding at the back, first of all you can get involved in accidents, but also you can only ride behind a guy in front and you can't even see over him.
Elmiger brings them off sector 21 with the leaders. There are down to 10 riders up front now. He looks very cool, calm and collected, Martin Elmiger.
Well, now they've got a chance to get some respite, but not all that much, because in 3.5 kilometres they have another section of cobblestones, cobblestone number 20 to go, and that's from Farmar to Kerenang.
That's Mitchell Docker, the Australian, who's now taking over from him. He's only 24.5 years of age. He's in his 3rd season with Skill Shimano. But this, I think, already showing to be his best. Don't always count the best seasons with wins. It's the fact he's finding his legs now to mix with the best bike riders in the world. But the peloton not really fragmenting, a long, thin line of riders there.
Well, what's happening now, it's starting to become slightly a war of attrition, and riders will begin to get eliminated from the rear of the main field. As you can see, this young rider here from Muscatel Euskadi in the orange jersey, the Basque Country team, and a team which we expect much more of when we come to the big mountains of races like the Giro d'Italia and the Tour de France. Now, this is a very difficult section of cobblestones, and if you know very much about the technicalities of the bike, normally you have a fairly small inside chainring on a bike like this, but for Paris-Roubaix they actually put a slightly larger chainring on just for a couple of sections of cobblestones like that one there, which would have 48 teeth on it.
And immediately on to sector 20 now, Famar Kerenang. 1.2 kilometres, only 2 stars, so basically not terribly technical, but nonetheless to be encountered at high speed very quickly after Aulnoy.
Well, you can see this young man, David Boucher, he's a French rider on Omega Pharma Lotto. He's actually sacrificing himself as much as he can when he gets to these cobblestone sections, because he's very happy with the presence of Andre Greipel in the group. Greipel sitting just a little bit further back there knows he's in a very good situation here this afternoon to get himself into what we normally call the early morning breakaway, although this afternoon it happened a little bit later.
Well, he's looking so strong, Paul. He got dropped on sector 24, but maybe he was told to fall back and get Andre up to the leaders, which is what has happened. He's not a tired rider if he can set the pace like this. He's got Jangeli on his back wheel there.
Well, you also get an added motivation if you're a team helper in a race like this when you get your team leader into a breakaway group, and there it allows you to find that little bit of extra energy that if you'd been actually doing it for yourself, you might not be able to muster.
Flags of Belgium and the flags of Flanders, but let me remind you, we are very much in France here, but we're racing with all speed towards the Belgian frontier, although we won't get there. We'll stop at Roubaix, about 5 or 6 kilometres from Belgium itself, but this is very typical Belgian roads as far as the spectators are concerned. And with the beautiful blue skies today, we are expecting thousands as the race gets into its last hour and a half.
Well, it's exceptionally fast, the race here this afternoon, because of these dry conditions, and that's why these guys are hammering along the road, trying to cause the devastation at the back end of the pack. And this group is doing an excellent job here, Phil, because they're just about to start tickling the 2-minute advantage over the peloton.
They have just got on with the job in hand. The peloton has been disrupted with continual falls and flat tyres, but these boys have had no such problems, and it's David Boucher who brings them off the cobblestones there now. Turns right and kicks quickly out the corner. There are 10 riders together, and he's thinking of Andre Greipel. There'd be no question as to who would win in a sprint if Greipel got to Roubaix, that's for sure.
Well, the main field now on that same section of cobblestones are 20 sections of cobblestones still remaining. This is the section Farmar to Kerenang, but in fact in about 3 kilometres time the leading group, Phil, will be on another section which takes them up to the town of Mang.
Cervelo, Garmin Cervelo, the American team on the left of our picture, driving there as well here now to try and keep their leaders in a position to pounce later. Each sector we clear, we're getting closer to sector 16, which is the entrance into the forest of Arenberg.
You get a chance here to see how difficult these cobblestones are. Compared to the cobblestones in the Tour of Flanders, these are much more difficult. They're a much rounder cobblestone, and many of these roads are only used really by farmers.
Well, our man there from Euskaltel has got himself just about on the back of the peloton now. He's had an awful long chase to rejoin.
Now, this is a very difficult race, and it's now being that elimination at the back end of the main field. And you may notice as well that in this instance, by the way, the police don't use their normal bikes. They normally use a big touring bike, but for this race they actually use cross bikes just because of the nature of the terrain they have to go over.
Yes, that's absolutely right. Motocross machinery for the gendarmerie, who are very brave men to ride on these cobblestones with the peloton all around them, that's for sure. Same to be said about our television cameras here, who are just in front of the whole charging pack. just sticking at 1:55.
A slight amount of respite for the moment, Phil, as these guys now start to realise they're going to have to hold a little bit of something back, because they know there's an awful lot of racing left to do, and nobody so far really seems to have turned off the gas since the very start in Compiègne this morning.
Well, they also are now off sector 20 here. Just look how narrow that exit is. But a very, very dry road, and it's proving to be hazardous. The dust on the road today, taking riders down, losing the grip on the front wheel. That is a very big peloton. They've just come off there with a tailwind as well. Now it's a crosswind, and now they're reassessing the situation. Aston have got 3 riders up here, but remember they've got 1 man in the breakaway, the Slovenian champion Goran Stangelaj.
Just got a quick glimpse there, not too far away from the front of Tyler Farrar, the great American sprinter. And he said this afternoon that he's actually not going to try and go for the win himself, although if the race situation dictated, he has got the ability to win.
Well, he's moved right up there into second wheel as the lead goes out to 2 minutes now, as we enter sector 19. 3 stars at 2.5 kilometers in length.
Well, we're now starting to circumnavigate the very industrial town in the north of France of Valenciennes. The riders turning towards the west now as they head out to go around the town of Dinant, and from Dinant they will then know that they're starting to line themselves up for the cobbles at the forest of Arenberg. For these guys, they've got that 2-minute advantage that they've been looking for as they now ride very smoothly across section number 19 to go. Now, these bikes that technically are actually slightly different to the ones that they use most of the rest of the season, because the bikes are slightly longer, about 1.5 centimeters longer in the wheelbase from center to center, and the reason for that is to make the back end of the bike just a little bit smoother going over the cobbles.
And the man showing them how to do it is the Aussie Mitchell Docker here. Nice shot of Thor Hushoff there, the world champion, stalking his prey. He finished second in this event last year. Would like to go 1 better. He's alongside Heinrich Hausler, who is also a very good finisher if he gets a shot at it. And looks as though Hushoff is happy with the way things are going at the moment. So much, can you believe that Norwegian television, and it's not a big sport in Norway, cycling, are showing 7 hours today of Paris-Roubaix, not just the race itself, but historical stuff as well. Now that means they're expecting Thor to win.
Well, they know that Thor Hushoff has got a very good chance of winning, second in the race last year. This is the leading group now. That gap is continuing to go up, Phil, and I would think very shortly the main field will start to get a little bit concerned about a gap of 2:05 for Andre Greipel.
This is Stangelaj now driving on the front, just his eyes dead set ahead here now. Section 19 at the moment at Kerenang. I must say, at 38 years of age, I think he's belying youth there. He looks very, very good indeed, Stangelaj. Goodbye to section 19.
Oh, good. Oh, hello to section 19 for the main field. It's a complicated race, Paris-Roubaix. You look down for a fraction of a second and things change very dramatically. This is a 3-star section, 2.5 kilometers in length.
And it's Garmin Cervelo who are driving the pace at the front here, just keeping that breakaway in check, which is easing out all the time, just a few seconds with the efforts of the cobblestones. So far, the breakaway has had no problems. I suppose we shouldn't say that. And you saw the spectators holding wheels there. In fact, they're mechanics, because the cars now are so spread-eagled around the course. They place mechanics at strategic points and just hold wheels in the hope that they might save the day for one of their charges.
Well, you have to plan Paris-Roubaix for weeks in advance, almost like an invasion, if you like. You have to have plenty of wheels in the strategic points out on the course, because everybody knows that sometimes the team cars that normally service the riders, Phil, can be as much as 3-4 minutes behind, and if you have to wait at the side of the road, any chance of winning Paris-Roubaix has gone out of the window.
Well, the blue skies reflecting on a very, very dusty peloton now. With 106.8 kilometers to go, the gap has moved on further, 2 minutes 15. That's the biggest that the 10 leaders have had all day.
You might have noticed a quick step moving up to the front as well. They've got a very good chance of winning this afternoon. They've got a 2-pronged attack with Sylvain Chavanel, who rode so well last week in the Tour of Flanders, and Tom Bonen, who's looking to get himself victory number 4.
No shortage, though, of riders who'll support Tom Bonen. I wouldn't think he would be a very popular winner, even though in France, not Belgium.
Kevin Van Impe was the rider on the front. He'll be the sacrificial lamb for the first section of cobblestones. And in reserve, they will hold their 3-star players, Bonen, Sylvain Chavanel and Gert Stegemans.
Still with the leaders here, 10 of them. They were 12 at one point, but we've slipped away 2. But the strong men are here. Bonen back at the peloton in a perfect position now, and if we see Tom Bonen near the front, you can bet your life with Fabian Cancellara won't be too far away either. They're all getting a little bit nervous now as we head towards the sector 16, which will take us into the forest of Arenberg. Once we're out the forest, we will turn to the right rather than the left as in previous years. And now we're entering sector 18 here, which will take us main en Monchaux sur Écaillon. 1,600 metres. How many miles is that, Paul?
Well, 1,600 metres. That corresponds to around about a mile exactly, and that's what these riders are facing up to on the cobblestones. They've already had an awful lot of cobblestones on their diet so far this afternoon, and there's a lot more on the menu.
Well, with 105 kilometres to go, the day started on sector 27 when 8 riders got there 40 seconds ahead of the peloton. They were strengthened by the arrival, amongst others, of Andre Greipel and Gorazd Stangeli, making 11. We're down to 10 leaders currently, 2 minutes 15 at the gap. George Hincapie has had a puncture but has safely rejoined. Fabian Cancellara has been forced to stop, but he too has got back up at the front of the race.
Well, interesting here, you might notice you had Omega Pharma Lotto on the front end of the group, and that was not to chase the breakaway. What they were doing is actually trying to slow down the progress of the peloton because they've got 2 men in the leading group of 10 riders.
Well, this is to give you the bone-jarring sensation the rider gets there from that low shot from our camera on a motorbike. These are the riders setting the pace. On the far right of our picture, the champion of Slovenia, that's Gorazd Stangeli at 38 years of age. He is an absolute champion of the cobblestones. He really can drive on these bad roads.
Yeah, he's a Slovenian national champion in that slightly different coloured strip to the rest of the riders from Team Astana, and he's very happy with the situation. You might just notice there he's riding a Specialized bike. Well, if I have to say anything, Phil, Specialized is rather special because they've won this race for the last 3 years.
Well, they're having a great season after launching this new bike at Milan-San Remo, and they won there with Matthew Goss. So they've got the right man at the front sitting on the right saddle, it seems, right now. 2 minutes 20 seconds the gap, 104 kilometres to go, slightly more. Stangeli seems very content to lead over these sections of cobblestones. Martin Elminger, who's strong over the first sectors, sitting there in that red jersey in 3rd place. Yeah, that road looks so smooth and welcoming, doesn't it? And then bang. Entering sector 18 now, among Monchaux. This is the peloton. They're going on to this section of cobblestones, 2 minutes 20 seconds behind a leading group of 10 riders who came together a couple of sectors ago. Now, none of the race favourites are in the breakaway, but there are certainly strong men up there. Men like Andre Greipel, Gorazd Stangeli and Martin Elminger are in that breakaway. It all started out on the first sector of cobblestones today with 8 riders getting clear, strengthened by the arrival of Greipel and Stangeli a few while ago now. But the big thing today is there's been no early morning breakaway. We often talk about, Paul, the peloton didn't want to let anybody go.
Well, for the first 80 or 100 kilometres, the attacks were coming thick and fast all of the time, but nobody was able to break the stranglehold of the front end of the main field, and I think that's because of the weather conditions. Because it's dry, everybody's expecting a very fast Paris-Roubaix here this afternoon, and it's dangerous to allow a breakaway to get clear. It wasn't, in fact, until the first section of cobblestones that the breakaway actually began to form.
Well, it hasn't been a trouble-free ride either for some of the anticipated race favourites. George Hincapie's had a flat tyre, but his BMC team brought him right back up. A lot of riders have fallen off, strangely on good roads, but it seems they are losing traction with their front wheels on the corners because of the dust on the roads. And they've been going down like 9 pins, but basically all rejoining at the bunch. Cancellara has been delayed as well, but he's back.
Well, this is section number 18 to go, the section from Main to Monchaux sur Écaillon. It's a section which is 1.6 kilometres long, Phil, and that's around about a 1 mile ride. But it is rated as a 3rd star rating. Now, in the star rating, we said before, it goes from 1 star all the way up to 5 stars. And there's a lot more 5-star racing to come.
Jim Young, he was in the breakaway. and it looks as though he's had a spot of bother and he's lost contact here. And we're midway between the break, and the break is down to 9 riders now, if Angoulême. There's the Longhorn cattle, the Highland cattle, I think they are. They build them rough out in northern France because they get tough winters here. This is Stangley. As we look at him now, he's been setting the pace over all of the bad sections of road. To the left of him now in the skill colours, that is Mitchell Docker, the Australian. Had a very good start to the Tour of Flanders last week as well. He was in the early breakaway there.
Well, as we look at the rider here coming off the back, Angoulême, we've got 102 kilometres to go to the finish. That's about 63 miles of racing left in the event here this afternoon. There is a bit of a surprise to see the big sprinter, Andre Greipel, in this leading group of 9 riders. Now, we'll think there'll be somewhat of a concern for him because he's a man who's got a very big pedigree with 21 victories last year.
Little shot of his back wheel, I wasn't too sure. He's riding on a softening tyre, and the trouble is that there's no service around just now because of the way the race has been splintering on these narrow sections. This is the Canadian rider here, David Velliot from Europe Car in the green colours. Having a great race, I have to say, today. This is where we all switch back. This is the pattern of Paris-Roubaix, constantly changing direction. It's not a north to south race or south to north race. It is zigzagging to actually find the bad roads of northern France.
Well, I was talking to the race organisers yesterday, Phil, and obviously this is part of the icons of the sport of professional cycling. They've said they actually have a programme to try and protect the cobblestones, to at least conserve 50 kilometres or 31 miles of cobblestones in the final 100 miles of the race.
Well, this is tourism-wise, economically-wise, this is a very important event to northern France here.
I think the mechanic there was getting a little bit precarious to the side of the road. I just wanted to explain what's going on here. Because today is an extremely dry day, there's a lot of dust getting into the mechanics, and what that mechanic was doing there was getting some lubricant into the chain for this rider to try and get himself back into the race, and it looks as if he might well have recovered.
I think the leaders must have slowed a little bit. Angoulême, obviously his gears were slipping, he wasn't getting full traction. They've sprayed some oil on it. Now, is he going to get back? There's the problem, hanging off the right side of the bike, and you can see it's moving around a bit when it shouldn't be, so he may well have a little gear problem there. Well, Cancellara has already changed his bike very early on today and got back without any trouble. Good time to take a bike change, actually, when he did.
Psychologically, though, that can be a little bit of a negative thing for a rider because you get used to a bike, even though these bikes nowadays are almost all identical and they're produced in such a regular fashion. One bike sometimes always seems to be a little bit more preferred to an athlete. So if you have to change off it on a big day like Paris-Roubaix, sometimes it goes against your psyche.
Well, he's going to get back this time, so we're going back up to 10 leaders. So we have 10 leaders out in front now, and we still have 101 kilometres left to ride. Just watching the riders here as they they just battle amongst themselves. They just concentrate on holding position. They are so preoccupied throughout this race. It is a very nervous moment. I think that's Andreas Clear, who's gone clear for the Sky team, for the Cervelo team, Garmin Cervelo.
Yeah, but sitting on the front there, I can just about recognise from this altitude the style of Stuart O'Grady, who rides for Leopard Trek. He's a teammate of Fabian Cancellara, and he will do whatever he can a little bit later on, Phil, I reckon, to try and get himself up to the front.
Well, it's not Bradley Wiggins, it's Sepp Van Mark, in fact, who's gone clear here for the American squad. There's the confirmation come through. 100 kilometres left to go.
Well, I have to say that although he misnamed Bradley Wiggins was in an early breakaway trying to get himself clear before they got to the cobblestone section. But talking yesterday to the management at Team Sky, they had said pretty much, Phil, that one of the guys that we're going to ride for this afternoon was Geraint Thomas, who was so phenomenal last week in the Tour of Flanders.
Well, he's won the Espoirs race. That's for the under-23 race. When on that occasion, the UK had first and second when we saw them flash under our commentary position because they finished that race a couple of hours before the big boys arrived. And that's a good indicator. Geraint Thomas rode superbly last week, and I think he's got good form. It wouldn't surprise me in the least if he's not in at the finale today. These are the giants of the North of France, they get the best view in the house, don't they?
They certainly do. The story behind the giants of Flanders there are they have these town fetes around the north of France throughout the summer months, and they bring out those giants to just give themselves a bit of a show, and there's a competition to produce the best looking giants.
We're all good lookers here. Now, I'm not too sure where this skilled Shimara rider slipped away.
Just slipping off the front end of the main field now, trying to get himself a slight advantage before we start to line up for the next sections of cobbles. We've actually now turned into a slightly more northerly direction. We're about to go through the next town of the day, which is the town of Denain, which is very famous for its own professional bike race called the Grand Prix of Denain. But it's after Denain that we'll have a change in the race route here this afternoon, because after the Forest of Arenberg, instead of turning to the left, we turn to the right to try and prevent the race from coming back together with an additional section of cobblestones. And it's a new section at Milan-Fosse à Bousigny.
Yes, well, we're looking forward to seeing those actually for the first time. And Paul Schoen was too modest to tell you he once won the Grand Prix de Denain. So you obviously rode over these cobble roads.
That race actually went over the cobblestone section on 4 big laps, first of all, and we actually got away on the first lap of the race. And they used those cobblestones to good effect. The Soleil au Nord, sunshine in the north. Well, we can't contradict that.
We don't see it too often, I can tell you. But it's a beautiful, beautiful day today. And the Région Nord-de-Pas-de-Calais, that's where we're racing today. And this is their biggest shop window, the Paris-Roubaix. There's no question.
You might just spot Matty Goss there in a slightly different coloured jersey to the normal HTC jersey, because he's actually the leader of the new World Pro Tour.
Yes, they also have the Latvian champion now as well, Gatis Smukulis, on their squad as well. That's about the biggest hill you'll see on the course today. A slight rise here. This is a flat area of France, so we've found much more difficult obstacles to be conquered rather than climbs. In the area of the Somme, and this is the breakaway now. Back to 10 riders as Jimmy Engelvent has rejoined the breakaway, which is still being powered here by Gorash Stangley. Meanwhile, back in the break, this is Robbie McEwen here, who tweeted yesterday, he packed his bags, he was heading into hell, and as he travelled up to the start from Belgium.
Well, the man driving the team car for Radio Shack this afternoon is none other than Dirk de Mol, a former winner of this bike race as well. It's probably the biggest victory that he ever had in his career. That's the north of France, and the big lumps you can see to the left and the right there, well, those are the old slag heaps, because this area earned its history from coal mining. And a lot of Polish people actually moved to this part of the world, either just before or just after the Second World War.
And the peloton making the most of what is a very smooth stretch of road here to do reparations to the bikes if they've got problems, sort everything out before they get into the ongoing nastiness of the hell of the north, because it's not very far away now. 2:40 is the gap. They've really worked hard to get any gap over the field. It was held at 1.5 minutes for a long, long way, but it does seem at the moment they're now making progress at 2 minutes 40. Leopard Trek, the riders in the black tops here, bringing the race to the fore, thinking no doubt of Cancellara, putting him in a position perhaps to move clear in the Forest of Arenberg.
Also the red and black jerseys, extremely powerful last week, Team BMC Racing, and they're moving George Hincapie to the front end of the main field. And of course the other man who will be a leader this afternoon, Alessandro Ballan, former winner of the Tour of Flanders and of course former world champion.
2 skilled riders up in the breakaway here now, including Mitchell Docker. Red jersey there of Elminger. 97 kilometers to go. We're looking here now at the leaders of the peloton. Luca Paolini. Oh no, we're not. These are trying to get away from the chase.
This is a group that's just slipped off the front end of the main field, and in fact Luca Paolini there, number 77, he's much better renowned as a sprinter, but he's trying to take the opportunity here to get clear before we get to the Forest of Arenberg. And look at the chaos there, these riders moving left and right, trying to move themselves to the front end of the main field, and you can see just how these riders, they bunny hop there to make sure that they don't flatten their tires once they jump over this traffic circle.
You mentioning there, Paul, that the Polish people who emigrated here during the times of the coal faces being in operation, the only Polish rider in the race is in that chase group, Jaroslav Marish, that's trying to get clear for the Saxo Bank team. No Polish rider, by the way, has ever appeared on the podium in Paris-Roubaix.
Well, there's one Polish rider who actually took up French citizenship, who claims to be the only man to have operated above the ground on the Forest of Arenberg and worked below it. And that, of course, was the former world champion from France, Jean Stablinski.
Yes, the world champion in the mid-60s, and passed away a couple of years ago, sadly. He was a great character on Paris-Roubaix.
This is Andre Greipel, normally a great sprinter, but a man who's got the right body build to ride well over the cobblestones. A German rider making the switch this year to move away from HTC and now to become the arch rival of Mark Cavendish, and very happily getting himself into this breakaway with 95 kilometers to go.
Just looking at these riders, they're all working together, they're all helping each other for the moment. They are rivals, of course, but they're now going to be friends until they get clear of the field for sure. And the field are paying very, very close attention now. Sat at the back is Timon Suber from the NetApp team, a German team which has been allowed a wild card entry. Left a lot of journalists in the finish area scratching their heads, wondering why they got in the race. This is for top professionals. And none of the German team has done a thing all year, but they've got a man in the breakaway right now. And so they're, I think, vindicating their selection.
Well, we're lining up now to the penultimate section of cobbles, Phil, before we get to the Forest of Arenberg, and that will be between Haveluy and Wallers. And Wallers is just on the outskirts of the big... Oh, there's another crash at the back, and Europe car have gone down.
Well, this time it is Europe car who have gone on the floor there.
Well, it was halfway down the pack, you see. What happened? He just made contact with the pavement at the side of the road there. And again, because these guys are trying to take risks, that looked to me as if it could very well have been Mathieu Claude.
Hit the deck rather painfully. We saw a lot of this in the Tour of Flanders last week, but again, it's happened on good stretches of road, which is very, very unusual. The riders are all tense and ready for the cobbles, they seem, at the moment, as we're racing now towards Wallers, and a nasty stretch of 2.5 kilometers as we go into sector 17. These boys just seeing the road ahead of them. It's a lot less complicated for these boys in the breakaway than the riders in the chase group.
Well, for this leading group of 10 riders, we're now just 1 kilometer away from the next section of cobblestones, and that's 17 to go. And that is Haveluy on its way up to Wallers, a section of 2.5 kilometers in length.
And there we are. The leaders have now hit the opening section here. This will be section 17, and led on by Skill Shimano again, 93 kilometers. Sector 17, Haveluy Wallers at 2.5 kilometers, and the commanding a lead of just around about 3 minutes. The computer is saying. I haven't seen that come up on television yet.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, this is a 4-star section, so starting to get just a little bit rougher now. It's 2.5 kilometers in length, and that corresponds to 1.5 miles of bone-jarring cobblestones here in the north of France. This is an extremely important strategic section of cobblestones, probably more so for the main field behind, because they will have to battle through this one before lining themselves up for the very famous, and I would say scary, Forest of Arenberg section.
Well, we're looking here at the chase group at the moment, and number 197 there is Sebastian Tergo, familiar name again from last week, up in the move. And also working hard there, Luca Paolini. I think he may have started the move, actually.
But look at the risks that riders are prepared to take, Phil, to get themselves to the front end of the main field before they go onto the cobblestone sections. And that man on the left there took a serious risk, because he nearly took a supermarket sign with him.
It doesn't take your own trolley along, your chariot, but he's back in the peloton. But he lost a lot of ground there. This is the head of the group now. 2 minutes 40 is the gap here, so they're not saying it's gone out to 3 minutes, but it'd be 2:40 to the chase group, I think, 3 minutes to the main field.
See how precarious those riders attack that. Amazing to see the number of different nationalities of flags at the race this year. We've got France, Switzerland, and of course, very predominantly Belgium.
Again, this is not really a race to chase the leaders down. This is a race to stay at the front, to get into the narrow cobbled roads in a good position and stop anybody moving up. It's absolute panic. I think riders went off to the left there. I'm not sure they all came round in one either.
Well, there's Sepp Van Mark in third position there for Garmin-Cervelo. I have a feeling Garmin-Cervelo are trying to get themselves sorted out now, because they feel today they've got a very good chance of winning this bike race with big Thor Hushovd, whose nickname, by the way, is the God of Thunder.
Well, you can see the way Van Mark is consistently looking over his shoulder to see the position of his team leaders. He's not racing for himself, that's for sure. These are the leaders now, as they set the pace up front. You get a little close view of the cobblestones here. Incredibly steady pictures from the back of that camera on the motorbike, I have to say. And there's the crash down on the other side of the road.
As Kevin Van Impe has gone down there very hard. And again, this was pretty much at the back end of the main field as they were jumping around trying to avoid Van Impe when he went down.
Yeah, a nice little bunny hop there. Did avoid the crash of Van Impe, but the rest were left to sort the bikes out.
Well, this is why you have to fight. This is what Paris-Roubaix is all about, fighting for position. And you have to fight for position every time you approach a cobblestone section because it really is chaos at the back.
Well, you can be the most talented bike rider in the world, but if you get a succession of bad luck, it leaves you in desperate trouble. It's happened to George Hincapie. Remember when George crashed, when he looked as though it might be the year he would win the race. And in the end, a newcomer by the name of Tom Bonen on the same team had to go and show him how to do it. We're looking at the blue skies now here as the riders are onto sector 17. We're heading towards the Forest of Arenberg. No change in the front. We've still got 10 riders up front. 2 minutes 40 is to a small chase group. 3 minutes to spread. These are the riders who are setting the pace, and they're looking very strong because they're not being delayed by any problems. The peloton constantly seeing the odd rider fall out of the peloton and having to get back into the action.
The orange Rabobank jersey on the front is Martin Gengele. They are on the section at 17 sections to go to the finish. Haveluy to Wallers. It's a 4-star section, 2,500 meters long. That's 1.5 miles of cobblestones. But what's more scary for these guys is they know what's next on the recipe this afternoon because it's going to be the Forest of Arenberg, the infamous Forest of Arenberg, only open once a year for Paris-Roubaix.
Well, you can see by the flags they're picking up a crosswind, turning into head now. This is Martin Gengele of Rabobank, who's setting the pace at the moment. He's been in the breakaway since the outset, which started at the first section of cobblestones. When 8 riders got clear, they were strengthened by a arrival of 4 more. We're now down to just 10 riders on the front.
Well, it's Saxo Bank, Garmin Cervelo and Quick Steps doing all of the pacemaking here. They realize we're coming to probably the most important strategic part of the race after this section number 17 to go from the Haveluy to Wallers section of the course, because everybody now is getting extremely nervous.
Including the commentators, because this is where the Paris-Roubaix by tradition always begins. They really race very, very hard to hold the position so they can see the long straight distance of the Forest of Arenberg. It's almost 2 kilometers of a perfectly straight road, and there will be a big crowd, so that's what they're doing now. They're trying to hold position for the entrance into the forest. It's a road that's never used all the year round, by the way. It's a protected road, and no motor vehicles normally are allowed in this forest.
But if you just keep looking over to the right-hand side, you'll see a white jersey with rainbow bands around it. Well, that is the world champion riding for the American team, Garmin Cervelo of Tor Hushovd. So that's the tactics of Garmin Cervelo now. Keep the pace nice and high. Try and keep their world champion up to the front end of the main field because they believe he's got a very good crack at winning this race this afternoon. That's him just on the left in about 14th position.
And yes, just holding his position there. Or we've also seen on the American squad too a lot of Tyler Farrar near the front of the race. So clearly he's looking to go with the moves if he can.
The quick-step rider up near the front, number 46, that's Gert Stegemans, and he's a possible outsider. Number 77 is Luca Paolini. Now, these are the riders who were just slightly off the front end of the main field before the start of this cobblestone section.
And Gregory Rast just peeping into our picture there on the Radio Shack squad. This is the chase group. But they haven't been closing in on that leading group. That they are staying out of trouble, of course, as they come off the cobblestones.
They only have 8 kilometers, 5 miles to go now, Phil, before they start at the Forest of Arenberg, or the Trench of Arenberg, as they call it. And everybody in the sport of professional cycling just knows how infamous that part of the course can be. It can destroy a rider's chances in a mere 1.5 miles.
And it has in the past, of course. The terrible crash brought to memory of a former 3-time winner of this event, Johan Museeuw, fell near the end of the forest on one occasion, completely splintered his kneecap, and it took him a long time to come back. So the riders know what's ahead of them now, and there'll be a big crowd in the forest as well. But it's a question of will they get there first, as the breakaway is making progress, but the forest now is literally just around the corner. 2 minutes, 10 seconds. The gap has come down, a little flurry of activity there.
Well, there you can see that's the 10-man leading group. They're keeping themselves nice and organised. They know they've got a big advantage here this afternoon because they will be riding in the first 10 positions into the Forest of Arenberg. They won't be subjected, Phil, to the chaos that the main field is going to be subjected to.
No, their project is quite simple. Just keep on the pressure and ride and not worry about the whereabouts of anybody, because they know behind chaos will reign supreme in the forest. As the Omega Farmer Lotto drive on here now. This again is Jimmy Ongelvant setting the pace. Stangley takes over from him, followed by Mitchell Docker, and there's a rider. Is that Hincapie again?
Well, that's a BMC rider stopped at the side of the road. A bit of chaos there. Now, if you stop so quickly like that, it's normally because you've got a machine that can be corrected by yourselves.
Yeah, it is George again. That's the second time he's had to stop. The first time he had to do something about it, but he's underway again. Well, it's not a good time, one has to say. It's a very unfortunate time. But Hincapie is going to have to recover quickly now, the Forest. And if anybody knows this route, it's Big George.
Well, Hincapie last week creating a fairly impressive record, 16 participations in the Tour. A crash at the back again there. You've got to be attentive all the time. That looks like Heinrich Hausler over on the left-hand side.
It was on the central reservation. Unfortunately, he fell and took a nasty prang there because riders hit him and not his bike, which has stayed on the road.
Well, everybody, this is all really, Phil, because people are extremely nervous now. They know how important it is. There's a split in the main field as well, and Hincapie could very well be behind that split, so he's going to have a hard time now getting himself to the front end of this race for the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, that is a very nasty fall. It's a pity the rider didn't stay where the bike stayed, because he fell right under the wheels of the advancing riders there. We think it's Heinrich Hausler. It looked like number 14, that's his race number on the American Garmin Cervelo team.
And because you see all these crashes that are happening, it makes you understand how important it can be to be in a breakaway like this off the front end of the main field. You don't have any of that chaos. You're not using up all of that nervous energy fighting for position all the time to stay in the first 10 or 15 places.
And these boys aren't concerned with what's happening behind. They're pushing on here towards the Forest. As we get through the town, then we'll leave the town over the railroad crossing and onto the long straight of Arenberg. So we're looking here at the 10 leaders, and tentative moves here, but quickly scurrying across is David Velo of Canada, and Europe car joins the 4 splinter group riders, but they're really just losing a little bit of their application at the moment.
Well, they're all starting to get nervous. They now know they're about to experience the Forest of Arenberg, and they're hoping to get a little bit of a recovery and respite from the real difficult pedaling that they've put on so far at the front end of this main field, because they all know how hard the Forest of Arenberg is. Most of the teams throughout the week leading up to Paris-Roubaix have actually been out to reconnoitre the course, and that's something they don't very often do to a lot of races.
The entrance is on the left of our picture by the disused lift shafts there of the local coal mine, which was an operating coal mine, not anymore. As we now come through Arenberg, and right through the greenery there is a dead straight cobbled road. This is a protected nature area actually, and it's opened only for the Paris-Roubaix. As the riders now line up for the dead straight road, you can actually see it straight through the trees waiting for them.
And as you said earlier, Phil, it only gets opened up once a year, and that is for Paris-Roubaix.
10 riders are going to get there first with an approximate lead of 2 minutes. As you see the riders now getting straight. It's and just look at all the campers. Boy, how this race has changed over the years. The spectators are now parking in their overnight vehicles here, just like the Tour de France, waiting for the race to enter Arenberg. It is possible to get to the finish, by the way, after this race has gone through, because you can jump on the nearby freeway and you're straight into Roubaix. The riders go off and they wander around. If you can hear that bell ringing, by the way, at the finishing line, the under-23s are just finishing a much shorter version of their own Paris-Roubaix, and one rider has won on his own, but I couldn't see from commentary position where he was. We are now entering the trench of the Arenberg Forest here. This is 5 stars, 2.4 kilometres, and it's sector 16, and 10 men have got in there with a lead of about 2 minutes 10.
Well, that 2.4 kilometres in length, Phil, corresponds to a very long 1.4 miles of some of the most treacherous cobblestones that the north of France can throw up at a bike race. The 10 men at the front, led here by Gorazd Stangelaj, the Slovenian national champion, have got the chance of getting onto this cobblestone section without the chaos, which we will see in a couple of minutes when the main field attacks it from the back.
Well, the British Union flag was flying there, so too was the Australian flag. Well, the Australian have a rider in the breakaway, Mitchell Docker. No British rider in the move yet, but this is where we expect to see some progress now. George Hincapie has had 2 problems so far before the Forest. He's recovered from them both. One was a flat tyre, one was a temporary stop, but he's got back into the peloton. And now it really is quite literally in the Forest, every man for himself. Pick your own route and hope it's the best one.
Well, Martin Elminger's the rider in the red and white jersey, a champion of Switzerland on the front now, and he's taking advantage of picking a clear way over these cobbles. They are unbelievable cobbles, and you might just see a little hint of green, and that's because the grass is popping up through these cobblestones, which have been around since the 1800s. And if you walk over to the right-hand side, away from this crowd, Phil, you well may walk into a wild boar.
Well, there's nothing boring about this race right now. The flag of Flanders obscuring our view, but we're back on front now with Martin Elminger, the champion of Switzerland, just looking what the damage is being caused to the rider behind. This is the entry approach for the chase and the main field from our motorbike. Look at the crowd here. They have literally camped here overnight. I've never noticed the big camping vehicles before, but they are here in their thousands.
Well, this is section 16 to go, the very, very famous Forest of Arenberg, 2.5 kilometres long, 5-star rating, 1.5 miles of cobblestones, and the speed that they're going over here is unbelievable. In fact, it's slightly downhill to begin with, Phil, and you can touch speeds of 50 to 55 kilometres an hour on these cobbles, but don't touch your brakes, my son, because you will go down like a deck of cards.
Well, where has Gorazd Stangelaj gone? He's shot off to the right of our picture here. He's through the grass, and he's going to have to get out of that, and he has done all the time. It is the lone Swiss rider on the front doing all of the work, Martin Elminger, the champion of Switzerland, and now there's somebody trying to get clear of the main field.
Well, if you don't know how fast 55 kilometres an hour is, that's just about this, and that's 35 miles an hour. If you need to do it yourself, just divide by 1.6.
A minute and 50 seconds. So once the boys started the action for the Forest, they've closed that gap down alarmingly quickly. In more than a spot above now, Olivier Bonner of the French Française des Jeux team. He's having a problem with the cobblestones. Hincapie has only just got back into the peloton. He had to make a stop, but he got back okay, so he's at a disadvantage. He's going to have to work his way through that peloton, but he's been in that position before, and he's done it. 84 kilometres to go, just over 50 miles to the finish. But from now on, this really is Paris-Roubaix.
Yes, and this year a little change as well, because normally when you come out of this section, you take a left-hand turn to go and find the cobblestones of Denain. Here we will turn to the right-hand side and go and find this brand new section at Milan-Fosse to Bousigny. And the reason the organisation have put that in was because they wanted to shorten the distance between the 2 cobblestone sections, preventing any riders left behind of getting themselves back into the race.
So you're probably hearing the band here. Well, that's all at the finishing line, entertaining the crowd. We've just seen the arrival of the under-23 Paris-Roubaix. They ride a much shorter version of this course. They're home, and the band has now come out to play. It's a wonderful day at Roubaix, but as you can see, it is literally hell in the Forest of Arenberg.
Well, the leading group of 10 riders now coming off this cobblestone section, taking that right-hand bend, as I've explained. For years and years, they've always turned left. So this is brand new, and Martin Elminger right now is waiting for the rest of the group to come back.
A wise man, still a long way to go. 83 kilometres, 51.5 miles still to race here. And no sign of the peloton cracking yet, but it is in a very, very long line. So it's going to be hard for the boys at the back to get back up to the front once we leave. There's problems on the road there, and that looks like Quick-Step has got themselves in trouble. I think it's Chavanel again, is it? No, it's Tom Bonen. Should have recognised him when he stood up. He's a tall boy.
Well, this is the wrong place for Tom Bonen to have a problem, Phil, and this is going to be very difficult for the former Belgian champion and world champion to get himself back into this race.
His chain has jammed. He's desperate for help. He's looking around for teammates. There is nobody there to help him, and this is the most crucial section of the race.
Well, he was right at the front end of the main field, and the big problem is he doesn't have any teammates around him to even pass him a bike. This is the wrong place to have a mechanical incident, and this could very well be the end of Tom Bonen's Paris-Roubaix this afternoon.
The 3-time winner of Paris-Roubaix is very, very isolated in the Forest of Arenberg. He's actually just looking for his service car, but you see the problem is they are so distributed around the course, and he's indicated, oh, I need a back tyre, and I need it now, but I think he needs a bike actually, not just a back wheel. Well, we've cut away from Bonen because the heads of the peloton are now coming off, and they're all looking around because they've probably wondering what on earth has happened to one of the big favourites.
Well, the other big problem, Phil, as well, is in fact the team cars behind the race here are deviated. They're not allowed to go down the Forest of Arenberg section, so there won't be anything there to help him now. He's back up onto his bike. He's managed to get that problem rectified slightly, but he's now coming out of the Forest of Arenberg with a massive disadvantage.
Well, he's got a wheel or a bicycle, and a lot of the official cars are shown not to go on, but this is actually a team car that's here, so he's got through.
Well, that's a Team Sky car. There you can see at the front of the main field, sitting in the middle there is the world champion from the American team Garmin Cervelo, Thor Hushovd, so no problems at all for him.
There's a big crash there as you were speaking, Paul, right on the straight road again. Lampre's gone down, AG2R are on the floor, Movie Star are down.
Well,
this has been the pattern of the day. They've been falling on this straight roads.
I think it's because this race has been so difficult, so hard. Everyone's thrown caution to the wind since the very first kilometres of the race, and they're all extremely tired so far.
Well, that is amazing, but again, riders falling, and the Lampre rider who went down was Dmitry Krivtsov of the Ukraine there. Anyway, 1 minute 50 is the gap, despite all of the chaos left behind. And the biggest man in trouble, Tom Bonen. So for the rest of today, Tom Bonen is going to have his work cut out now to try and win Paris-Roubaix. This is the leading group here. 1 minute 50 seconds, the gap. And they'll be blissfully unaware of the chaos in the forest as they continue to push on.
Well, they're trying to get themselves organised now at the front end of the main field. They've realised that there is chaos behind, and this is the possibility to put the hammer down or the last nail into the coffin of any of the riders who got left behind on the Forest of Arenberg. And one of those men left behind is the big Belgian champion, Tom Bonen. Now, has he got the courage, has he got the stomach and the guts left in him, Phil, to fight his way back into this race?
Yes, that's the big thing. It's okay if you're strong and everything's going right, but have you got the mental approach to recover from these situations? He was quite rightly, I think, looking a little bit upset in the forest because there was nobody able to get to him. He was seeing faces at the back of that bunch he'd never seen in his life before, and going to have to pass them all to get back into the action.
Well, this is what Paris-Roubaix is all about. Looks like big Johan van Summeren coming to the front now, trying to whip it up, looking over his shoulder. You see these riders keep looking over their shoulders. They want to make sure they've got the right riders in the group.
This is the Movie Star rider, I think, here. And number 7 there is Tom Stamschneider from Leopard Trek. These boys recovering from that shunt we've just seen and trying to get back in the action.
Well, there's a bit of organisation here from Quick Step, and that's because Tom Bonen has got himself into this group. There he is, number 41. The team coming up alongside him. He's got Gert Stegemans just in front of him. Yep. He has to now stay calm for the next few kilometres or so to try and ride himself back into this race.
He's got his teammates to help him. That's the importance of having strong men at this stage of the race. He's also got Leif Hoster in this group, another Belgian cyclist who must have been delayed. He's going to have to recover. You see around the cuffs of his shirt there, his racing jersey, the bands of the rainbow, depicting a former World Road Race champion. And the current one is right up at the front, Garmin Cervelo's Thor Hushovd just now. Here we are back in the forest with the peloton here, and this is a replay of the situation. That's what had happened. And Tom finally, I presume he changed his bike.
Yeah, he did a very, very quick change, almost so quick it deceived the eye there, but he changed his new bike. The mechanic managed to get up to him, which is why he shouted to a teammate there, "Carry on, mate, I'll catch back up with you."
Confident man, as the team car here now is trying to chiv him along a little bit. There's the donkeys in the field, but these are the thoroughbreds on the bikes.
Well, hopefully a little bit of calm now in the leading group of 10 riders as they start to line themselves up for this brand new section of cobblestones, the section from Milan-Fosse to Bousigny. It's coming up in about 2 kilometres time.
The breakaway containing the Australian Mitchell Docker. He's been out front since they came onto the first section of cobblestones, 27 in a group of 8, and then strengthened by the arrival of Andre Greipel, another well-known rider from Australia, although he's a German, but he's won the Santos Tour Down Under. And is a big sprinter, and he joined these with a long chase as we now bounce our way onto sector 15 now. This is the new sector at Milan-Fosse.
Milan-Fosse. This is introduced here, Phil, just to make sure that it shortened the distance between the Forest of Arenberg and the next section of cobblestones. It's only ranked at a 3-star rating and 1.4 kilometers long. That converts to around about 0.8 of a mile.
Here's big Tom Bonan trying to cross the gaps now and reach the main part of the race here. You can see the cars are being pulled out. It's a lonely ride back to the front for Tom Bonan, and he knows he's got to do it himself because the boys aren't going to help him.
Well, he's run out of teammates there. He sees this as being a very dramatic part of the race to try and get himself across the gap as quickly as possible. He will be hoping for a slight amount of slowing down in the group in front of him to reintegrate this race, and then he'll battle his way through one. He's caught a group who've been left behind there, and he's not taking any prisoners at all here. He's going to go straight by and head out to the next section of cobblestones.
So a bike change for Tom Bonan then, as he now tries to repair the damage caused by the Forest of Arenberg. Now he knows what a lonely life it is, even for a team leader in the Queen of the Classics, because this lady has a bite. We're looking at the group here now, which contains Tom Bonan, still trying to recover from that problem. The peloton itself, I'm never sure which is the peloton anymore, because our cameras are now all over the place as the race is completely split up in the forest itself.
Well, that is what is the front end of the main field, and it's not a very large main field either, because there was a decimation of the peloton when they went through the Forest of Arenberg. They have actually slowed down a fraction there, Phil, before they get to the next section of cobblestones, and that might just give Tom Bonan a chance to get himself back into this race.
Well, sat here at the back is Lars Bohm. This is the section now. We're now on section 17, section 8, sorry, we're counting down. We're now on section 15 here, which is the new one at the Milan-Fosse, where we've turned right as we came out of the forest, and we're now onto this new section of cobblestones. We saw a little shot there of Lars Bohm. He'll love this because the former world cyclocross champion is on his terrain right now. Goodbye to section 15 at Milan-Fosse for the leaders.
Well, the leaders are starting to lose a fair chunk of their advantage. They went into the Forest of Arenberg with an advantage of 2.5 minutes. They're now standing on an advantage of 1 minute and 10 seconds. But it's absolute chaos in the main field behind. One or two small groups fracturing off the front, but the main field, I think, slowing down for a moment.
Back into the bike and getting rid of the other one to some souvenir hunter on the side of the road, but he's done it now. These boys oblivious to what's going on behind them as they run out. 77 kilometers left to go. That's about 48 miles, 46 miles still to ride.
Well, these guys, and this is going back to the next group on the road now, trying to get themselves an advantage. It's the poursuivant, the chasing group. If they've stealed an advantage off the front end of the main field as they went through the Forest of Arenberg, and they're trying to consolidate on that. But behind, the main field has slowed down a fraction.
Well, this is the second group on the road now, as they've just come off sector 15 at Milan-Fosse as well. Next sector is about 4 kilometers in front now, and Johan van Summeren of the American Garmin Cervelo team has got into this group. Lars Bach, Jürgen Roland, Quinziato, Lars Bohm, Frederick Guédon, a former winner and an opportunist, and Baden Cook, the Australian, who says he's ready for Paris-Roubaix today.
Well, I tell you what, the race have given him a number 171, and when you have a 1 at the end of your number, that's usually an indicator that you're the team leader. And Baden Cook, I saw him last night checking all the equipment as we went to have a look at his team car, and he was making sure that everything was right. A nice little anecdote about this team, Saxo Bank. They've got handmade tyres, and in this day and age of mass production, I would think that cost them a few pennies.
Well, we'd like to see a great performance out of Cook. He lives down in Melbourne and is often seen riding up and down the beach road there outside of Brighton, but he's ready for a good result, I think, now. 32 years of age. He won a couple of races last year, and he actually won his last race at Saint-Quentin last year, which is not far away. This is still the recovery from Tom Bonan, and he's being left to do all of the chasing himself. It's a bit of a ride now, 2 3/4 minutes, and the men that matter to him are ahead.
Well, I've seen many men ride themselves back into Paris-Roubaix in the past. There's somebody there at the side of the road got another slight problem. That's Sylvain Chavanel. So it's not a great day of racing for Quick-Step here this afternoon, because when Lady Luck is not on your side, she isn't a lot of fun.
The two animators, along with others, in the Tour of Flanders last week have both been standing on the roadside far too often today. Chavanel, that's not the first time he's been brought to a halt, but how lucky was he to find a spare wheel around that corner? So, with this, a lot of the stars in trouble here now, so far, Fabian Cancellara and Thor Hushovd have had no such problems. 76 kilometres to go. The breakaway, this is Greipel who caught the leaders. David Boucher went back for him. He was in the breakaway. We think he dropped back. He certainly went back and brought Greipel up to the leading group.
Well, this is the next group on the road. That's Lars Bak there, group number 2. Matty Heyman in this group also there. You can see these guys have realised they've got a very good chance here of stealing an advantage over the front end of the main field.
Yes, Matty Heyman, another rider who seems to have refound himself this year. He's riding superbly for Team Sky. Team Sky had a very active race last week as well, so don't count them out. They've got 2 possible candidates. Juan Antonio Fletcher, who's trying to become the first Spanish rider ever to win Paris-Roubaix. He's come close, he's had a second, but no win yet. And Geraint Thomas, the youngster from Wales, who rode brilliantly last week, and he was riding to help Fletcher, and he finishes ahead of him.
Well, I was told by one of the Belgian journalists who was actually on the bike commentating for Belgian television, he said, well, you didn't see half of the work that was done by Geraint Thomas, and he puts him down as a dark horse to win this race this afternoon.
Let's hope so. It'll be a great result. No Welshman certainly ever won this race, and no British rider either.
Well, we're just looking back down the line there. I have to say, I've got my fingers crossed here this afternoon for Tom Bonan, but he's looking at a big arse there, Phil, because he's a minute behind the main field that he's got to try and pull back. I have seen comebacks like this in Paris-Roubaix in the past, and one of the famous comebacks I remember was a guy by the name of Fons de Wolf. He was around about 5 minutes behind at one stage after the Forest of Arenberg. He fought his way back through the race and eventually finished up in 4th place on that occasion.
Well, what you have to remember is that the bad luck of Bonan can very quickly befall somebody else like Cancellara or even George Hincapie, and suddenly you're all chasing. We've just entered Sector 14 now at Billon. This is near Tilloy, and this is a 2-star section, so it's a nice little hors d'oeuvre as we head towards Orchy.
Yes, just 1,100 metres long, and that corresponds to around about 0.7 of a mile. And it is an easier section, if you can have such a thing as an easy section of cobblestones, because all of these cobblestones, they vibrate and they bounce right the way up through the machine. And you can see the riders' arms and legs shaking because of the cobblestones. This is probably the only race in the world, Phil, where the day afterwards, you've actually got sore hands.
Now, this is Chavanel here, the hero of last week, finished second in Flanders. He's now finding himself placed into a select chase group, and he's now, I think, behind the he's actually with Bonan now. So he's in this group with Tom Bonan. Well, there's 2 strong riders, 2 pre-race favourites finding themselves on the defensive.
Well, that could be a big advantage because the 2 of them have got the form. We saw how well they were very dominant in the race last week, and working together, that might give them a very good chance of riding back into the main field, and I think they're about to do it.
Well, we're looking here at what we'll call the Bonan group now, but he's been joined by Sylvain Chavanel as well. Because they're both in this pack after troubles, and they're riding approximately 1 minute behind this pack of riders here. There's still a breakaway of 10 ahead. The spread, though, is only 50 seconds. The main field, as we're now on to cobble section 14, is actually, it's a sort of a 2-part section, this. There's 2 sectors of 14, making up a total distance of 3.5 kilometres. There's a little slab of nice paving in between.
Yeah, that corresponds to around about 2 miles of cobblestones if you bolt the 2 together. And the second section from Tilloy to Sarcey-Rosières is a rather long section on its own at 2.4 kilometres. This is a battle of survival. Everybody's trying to ride themselves back into the race here. And at the end of the day, if you go to the showers at Paris-Roubaix, there are so many tales of bad luck that we don't even get a chance to witness from the television cameras.
That's absolutely right, as the riders start to swab off their road rash, because most of the riders at some stage have been in problems today. Early on, we had a lot of riders go down, many of them on good roads individually, just hitting roadside furniture, central reservations, traffic signs, and down they go. This is the leading group, being led again now by the champion of Switzerland in the red, Martin Elmiger. Martin Jangelai takes over, the Dutchman. Then follows through Mitchell Docker here, drives through. They're all working here, and that's why they're hanging on.
Well, they've got a 45-second advantage, Phil, over a rather interesting group which is coming across the gap. The main field around about 2 minutes in arrears with Frédéric Guédon, former winner of Paris-Roubaix for France. And at 38 years of age, he's still showing complete and utter respect for this bike race.
Yes, and Frédéric Guédon, well, his manager Marc Madio said only yesterday he doesn't think Guédon can win again. He's getting too old, but he'll be very much a player. Well, I think that Madio himself won this race on 2 occasions, but Guédon is a man for the big races.
He certainly is. He's won less than 10 races in his career, but if you put into those races, Phil, Paris-Roubaix and Paris-Tours, that's not too bad for a career.
I'd settle for just 2 wins. Well, there's the composition of the chase. Johan van Summeren, part of the Garmin-Cervelo team. Jürgen Rollins, another reliable boy. Lars Bohm, very strong on situations like this. And Baden Cook, the Australian. So there's the composition of the chase group. We're looking down now. Leopard Trek is doing the pacemaking on what is left of the main peloton at the moment. And Tom Bonen's group with Sylvain Chavanel are a minute further back of this group. And that's a long, angry line, too, at the tail end of this peloton. So the pressure's really remaining on here.
No, certainly everybody realises they need to pull this race back together. This race is far from over, and there's still a lot more artillery to come out and be fired on the cobblestones here in the northern part of France. Just sitting on the back there, the rider from the Française de Jure, in fact, is the former Belarusian champion, Jotas Hutorovic, a very good sprinter.
Martin Mortensen, number 3, trying to snatch at wheels and hang on to the whip end of the race just there. We're still on sector 14 here, which is quite a long section. Looking at the bouncing wheels now as we're on the second part of sector 4, sector measured at 3.5 kilometers. And there's no change in the order at the moment. The breakaway of 10 holding off a chase group which includes Lars Bohm, Baden Cook, Frédéric Guédon, Johan van Summeren. They're riding at 40 seconds. The main field a couple of minutes back, and then you go back a further minute to a very, very strong chase by Tom Bonen. But whenever we see Bonen, nobody else is chasing.
Well, they all know the reputation of the man, I think possibly, Phil, because they can't work with him because he's such a strong bike rider, and he will be motivated like anything to ride himself back into this race. He won't give up. He knows he's got the form, and he knows how important this week of racing is for him in the whole of this year's calendar, because Tour of Flanders and Paris-Roubaix are the races that he wants to win.
Well, Jimmy Engoulevent driving at the front, flicks his arm there, needs a little bit of help. Oh, this is the chase group here, I beg your pardon. This is the chase group with Baden Cook is in this group.
Was in fact Guédon. This is the main field of most of the big contenders. Riding in 3rd place there, the world champion, riding for Garmin-Cervelo. That was Thor Hushovd. There are not many men left in this group, and that was all the damage that was done by the Forest of Arenberg. We've said it every year, Phil, but it's at the Forest of Arenberg where you've got a serious chance of losing the race.